Welcome back to the home studio and welcome to episode 33 of the Stevie Richards Show. My name is Stevie Richards. Today we're going to continue our series leading up to the first ECW pay-per-view, Barely Legal in 1997. There's a lot of stuff to go through. We are going to get to the actual review of the pay-per-view and a couple watch-alongs. There might be even a What Went Wrong featuring yours truly and a ladder. I'm guessing there will be, but I don't have to guess. I have my co-host here, Popeye, James Romero. How are you doing?
Oh, I've got the forearms and everything.
You do. Look at you, man. You eating your spinach.
What's been going on, man?
Nothing much. I mean, the back injury has moved my hip now. I have a hip pointer, so everything is going smashingly well, as you would say over there in the UK. I don't know what's going on. You don't say that?
No, yeah, maybe if I had my bowler hat on and it was the 30s, yeah.
Well, you're halfway there with the pipe anyway, isn't that like Peaky Blinders type stuff right there?
Gone.
Did I get it right?
No, you're going to be asking me for my bumper shoot or whatever, the umbrella or something like that. Oh, look, there's a red bus.
Oh, do you like your protein shake shaken and not stirred, Mr. Bond? How's that?
What? Yeah, now I'm a massive James Bond fan. You're talking my language. Right, okay, forget what we were going to say. What's your opinions on creatine?
On creatine? Oh, my God.
Yes.
Which month is it? You look at the studies, every other month, every supplement's either the best thing for you or the worst thing. I would say at my age, being 53 and just trying to retain any kind of muscle as you age without having any kind of assistance with TRT or other supplements, creatine can be something, especially if you're trying to cut out red meat, it can be beneficial. Because most of your creatine you're going to get from red meat, but obviously red meat, as you get older, could be, worse, a worse thing rather than a better thing. Everything in moderation is always great. Creatine, though, with somebody with my kind of body dysmorphia, it volumizes your muscles, so it adds on water weight. So for me, sometimes I don't like to take it because I feel like I'm not lean enough because I'm taking creatine. What are your thoughts on that?
I've never tried it. The reason I never tried it is because it said, one study said many, many years ago that it will make your hair fall out. And I thought, well, that's that out then. And apparently that has never, ever been replicated in any other study since. So I thought I might get on the creatine. I might have a go of it, report back. But the only thing is that you're supposed to take it every day. And I'm just not interested in having to mess around and make a shake every single day to do it, because then if you're gonna have a shake, does that then become like a meal replacement for breakfast?
No, you
or
just
something?
put it in your pre-workout. So you get an odorless, flavorless creatine, which most of them are, and those are the cheapest one, like bulk supplements here in the U.S. and other ones. You can get a big bag of it. It can last you. Now that's the problem too with supplements as well. Pre-workout supplements, powders, mostly powders. If you leave it stored too long, a lot of times it will crystallize if the temperature changes and stuff. We've bought creatine, lysine, and other things. Can't even pronounce my Philly accent already, everybody. Lysine does not have a G at the end for some reason. But when you have to kind of look at that and see what the shelf life really is, because a lot of times that you've had that happen with pre-workouts and other things, you leave it on the shelf for months, then it's crystallized, you can't use it, and it's essentially something happened with the air hitting it, oxidation, whatever it might be, temperature changes. So I would try out a month of it. I'd put it in my pre-workout. That's what my wife does. She was giving it to me on weight days without me even knowing about it because of my body dysmorphia. I was like, I felt really good at the gym for the past week. You've been taking creatine. Oh my God, I'm getting fat. Get me off it.
I'm going to give it a go. I mean, I've had a bag sat in the pantry cupboard for months now, so I need to. I mean, it might have just turned into a big block of cement in the bag by this point. But
what's your red meat consumption like?
None. I mean, that's not true. I do have currently vitamin D3 gummies that I keep on my desk because it's the only way I'll remember to actually take them. I did have some multivitamins as well, but like I remember joking. I don't know who I joked. Maybe Shane, whoever I joked with. Is I said I'll never make it in the wrestling business because I can't take pills. I'm one of these people who
look
has
at me. I didn't make it either.
How dare you? How dare you put yourself down? You're not allowed to do that.
It's been a while.
True, you know it.
I was an arrogant prick for a few weeks there when I was talking about other people. I'll get back to being humble.
With Yeah, I can't take pills. I've got like a total mental block. I've got like tumor. It's why I remember once I was in a club at 18 and someone said, just take some ecstasy with me. And I just looked at him and went, nah, because I couldn't take because I couldn't swallow it.
Well, you might have been in the New Bane crowd, though. That you have needles or you hate needles?
No, for God's sake.
Okay, so you're good. You're like me, then.
No, we were all clubbing types. So I was the only one just bopping around, just like with beer in my system.
Well, I just meant in the wrestling business. New Bane was a thing with some of the guys in the locker room. Literally shooting it. Yeah, it's bad news, man.
Painkiller, was it not?
Yeah.
Or is it?
Yeah. Inject. I probably what they gave me when I went back in the ER. I was like, this is great. I'm ready to wrestle 48 minutes, everybody. Can't walk, but I'll wrestle.
Did you ever hear the Perry Saturn? Okay, right. One thing, Perry Saturn mentioned us briefly on Maven's video last Friday. Did you see that?
I heard about it yesterday. I did not see it, though.
Yeah, I like it because Saturn went, oh, for God's sake, we should have a podcast together because me and Stevie have complete opposite opinions on everything with wrestling. But that being said, in an old interview he gave, he used to say that he used to inject New Bane under his tongue because then it would hide the track marks.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's intense. Good Lord.
He's an intense fellow.
He is a very intense fellow. That's why I don't I agree with everything Perry says. We do not hold opposing opinions on anything, except maybe he might have, I think I might have mentioned that something about Madden and him, or I would beat him in Madden. That probably did rub him the wrong way, and that's why he's coming after me.
Yeah, it probably will be. I hope to see him. If I do go Vegas, I'll probably see him there, but I'm not sure I'm going Vegas. So it might actually depend if you go to Vegas for WrestleMania weekend and WrestleCon and stuff like that. But I don't think you want to either, so I think I might be staying home. We'll see.
I'll be on the trampoline with dumbbells, bouncing up and down, waiting for the call.
Because you're not booked.
I'm not booked, Terry.
Yeah.
That's it.
What?
Well, I mean, you would
wrestle
book
20
me.
years.
Yeah, you would book me, but I don't know if I'm going. I don't think so.
Yeah.
I'll tell you why. All right, you want to let's continue the body dysmorphia type thing, and getting back to beating myself up. Although I'm not, I'm very self-conscious about the way I'm looking right now and being underweight and the pain in my back and my hip and everything and travel. I mean, it's not that close to WrestleMania, but it's close enough to where you got to make the decision, got to book things, you got to set up the itinerary and the schedule while you're there, and it's just so unpredictable with what I'm going through. But yeah, my ego is like, I don't feel like I'm in the best shape I can be in and represent myself very well. Here, I'm wearing sleeves. That's how you know how self-conscious I am right now. But is it an ego thing? Yeah. I mean, we all have egos in wrestling, and I want to look the best that I can look for pictures, for the fans, and all that stuff. I want to look TV ready, although I'm not on TV right now.
The original plan for me was Dutch and I were going to go, and for people asking, I'm not going to make a big thing of it. I don't have an update for you, essentially. Dutch is still dealing with health issues. That's basically the update. So, he's not going to be returning, tomorrow or anything like that is the full answer. But originally, it was going to be me and Dutch going, and he'd agreed. And then, he's been sick for so long. And then I thought, well, Stevie, and then Stevie... Yeah.
Stevie's scared of people and crowds and everything, and somehow picked wrestling to be a part. Afraid to fly, too. So, yeah, I've really picked a great thing to be a part of 31 years.
Man, I used to be afraid of flying until I discovered Valium. Man, that just sings
no,
you
can't
across.
Take pills, everybody. Look at it. I'll take that.
Oh, yeah. No, yeah, Valium's also... I remember once...
You can't take a multivitamin, but, man, you hop on a plane, I can digest that. That's awesome.
It was... no, we had the weaker stuff, which was diazepam or something like that. And then my mate, a friend of mine, could get a hold of Valium, and we ended up just having a couple of Valium because my friend was afraid to fly as well. I think he uses that as an excuse. So just to steady our nerves, a few rum and cokes, a Valium. But the thing was, my body wasn't ready for it. So I remember we'd flown from Vietnam to Thailand and then Bangkok to Dubai, and that's when it really started kicking in. And it was like an energy drink for me for some reason. I'm just like... It was like dead intense in Dubai airport, which is the biggest airport in the world. And there's like a city indoors. And then just looking around, just going, oh, God, this is terrible. Oh man!
So did you make stops in all 4 places, or was that just a flight itinerary from one to the other?
It was a flight itinerary. It was 26 hours. It was Da Nang to Bangkok to Dubai because my mate insisted we had to fly Etihad, and then Dubai back to Manchester. It was horrendous.
You were in some of the countries that have no tolerance if you're a little bit off from taking whatever.
Oh my God! You just reminded me of the story. So I'd bought an iPad off my mate a year earlier, right? And as a joke, after, because he's just a complete drug addict. And I just went, have you ever done any chopping on that iPad? And he went, oh yeah, loads, absolutely loads. And I went, oh my God. And I only just remembered this conversation as the security clearance guy had taken the iPad out and
swabbed it.
Swabbed it. And luckily, because I know I cleaned it because I asked this really early on after I bought it, and I must have cleaned it because he swabbed it and waved me through. But man, I tell you what, I could have shat a diamond out if you shoved a lump of coal up me at that point. I was just like, because they would have.
Plus all the stuff you took that made you hyper vigilant of everything.
Yeah, exactly. Right? So I was wide-eyed already. Just
you
like
look suspicious as anything.
Oh man! And the thing with Dubai as well, I think it was Dubai Airport, is that they have like 2 securities. You know, normally you just go into the airport. There's one. They had like one security systems check all your stuff. Then you had to go through a completely separate one before you get on the plane again. And I don't know why. Well, probably for people like me rolling on Valium.
It might be because there might be some points where blind spots where people could pass stuff off or do whatever, and then you get on the plane.
Yeah. Man, that was a terrible flight back, I'll tell you. All right, wrestling. Intro as well. I've got 2 books, one on Owen Hart, one on The Rock. Please buy them. Amazon links in description. Stevie has a YouTube fitness channel, for goodness sake. Go and see. What is the latest on the fitness channel? Have you updated it recently?
I actually did a pretty short video from one of the garage gyms. It was irony, or the definition of irony, because I had 2 products from Teeter, which are basically back relief or back rehab type of products, like inversion table, decompression, that kind of stuff. And I'm saying I have to assemble these products with an injured back that are supposed to help my injured back, while being careful assembling the back injury products with an injured back. So it's a little bit of an irony inception type of thing. But yeah, hey, I'm going to update people and take people through some of the stuff, the basic workouts, the modifications, the things I'm going through. There's a lot of people that seem to be going through almost the same exact thing or something relative. So hopefully I can use this experience to help other people out, which is really why I started the fitness channel in the first place, is to help people out. So hopefully I can convey that in the videos up there. And there are people that are subscribing. It's been an uptick in subscribers since you started pitching it. So thank you.
Yeah, I'm glad of that as well. There's another thing as well that we haven't pitched in a while. We keep forgetting is Stevie Richards is on Cameo. So if you want a cameo from Stevie himself, all you have to do is click the link in the description. I think there's like a link tree kind of thing and find it from there. And most importantly of all, the Patreon, the Stevie Richards Show Patreon. What is going up this week?
I was thinking about changing the URL to patreon.com/Stevie and James, or James and Stevie, because James is joining me on that. So there's a lot more premium content. This week, I'm actually going to probably experiment with the 75-inch smartboard. We never do the smartboard segments anymore. So I'm going to experiment with that station over there and try to do some other stuff. But also we have a watch along. We just did on World of Sport, which was really, really enjoyable. And it should go up probably sometime this week, I would guess.
Mm-hmm. One of my favorites, Johnny England, a very, very small dude, but full of personality. I can't remember what his nickname was, Mr. Body or something like that. But he's got Larry Zbyszko-like timing as far as starting a match. And it's actually a rare one where it's not a round system, it's 1-4. Which they would do, they just mix it up sometimes. I love World of Sport. We're going to get into a bit of wrestling news. And it's only really one piece, but it's something that we need to delve in a bit. And it is every single WWE and AEW wrestler that has been, or performer, that has been released in the past week or so. We're going to go to the WWE ones first. So, how do you want me to do this? Shall I just rattle off the names, or should we go one by one?
We can go one by one, because I think each person has a unique story. One in particular is this first one in your notes, because I really do think they missed the boat on a real life situation where she could have been a great ambassador. I'll say the name. I'll start with the name Sonya Deville. All right. So basically, you said her WWE contract was not renewed, and Sonya's leaving is maybe the only real surprise here, because she was featured in the Pure Fusion Collective with the other two that are still, at least for now, right at the time of this recording, still with the company. But my thoughts right off the bat, and see if you can agree or disagree with me, James. Sonya Deville went through a very, very traumatic experience being stalked by a fan, and to the point where the fan had things in the trunk, rope, other things where you don't know how far this truly disturbed person was going to take this. And this was something that occurred where Sonya had to call the police like very early in the morning, like 1, 2 a.m. in the morning. I think this guy was outside her place ready to do God knows what. Am I off base with this so far?
No, I can't remember who she was. Was it Mandy Rose? Or
she was with Mandy Rose and the Residents. But it doesn't matter who she was with unless there was somebody there with firearms or some kind of protection. This guy had been, from what I know, didn't it spawn from social media and him sending tons of messages and stuff like that and tweeting at her, and then it became just very unhealthy, to the point of having items in the trunk of your car kind of obsession. That's very scary.
Like weapons and duct tape and rope and stuff like that. He was going there to kidnap her. I mean, he got what did he get? 10, 15 years? I can't remember. I was just trying to
He didn't get enough. I don't think he got enough. I mean, that's a person, I don't know if you could ever let a person like that back out on the street. Everybody deserves second chances. But when you take something that far from a mental and emotional instability, I should say more specifically, basis, that person can't function in society. Because God forbid,
it was, of him. He looked like Hornswoggle.
Yeah, but God forbid too. Like, I thought about it when he was caught. Was she the first one? And did he? I would look into the history of somebody like that to see what their record is, or like if there was missing women somewhere. You know what I mean? I would really look deep into what this person, because they're obviously capable of doing it. They showed up. They had that there, and we're going to get back to Sonya in a second. But I want to get the timeline straight on this, because it's very important how WWE could have had an ambassador in Sonya Deville with situations like this. So I know you have some stuff you want to look up.
Yeah, well, one, he looks like Hornswoggle. Two, Sonya Deville's a lesbian. So why would you even pick someone that you had zero chance with, even if you like the most handsome guy in the world? I believe they were trying to strike a plea deal that was going to put him behind bars for 15 years. He drove from South Carolina to the Bay Area with a knife, zip ties, and duct tape with the plan of kidnapping the wrestler. Right, so this isn't really the main point we're saying about Sonya, in the sense that I think she might have been like the first openly lesbian wrestler in WWE as well. But the other point is that, as you were saying before, she was used. She was there all the time. It's not like the creator didn't have anything for her like most of the rest of this list. So I wonder why they didn't renew it.
Well, there's a few. I don't know why. I don't know if it was mutual or she wanted our opportunities to do other things. But yeah, she was featured. She was featured as co-GM with Adam Pearce as well. She's been featured a lot. And then, of course, started out with Mandy Rose, which was a team that had a good look to them and had something there. So this girl could talk. This girl has a shoot background as well. That's why she was in there with the other two girls, Shayna Baszler and Zoe Stark. They have kind of like an MMA women's type of look to them. But at the same time, I feel like Sonya Deville, especially after all this occurred, could have had a Titus O'Neil type of spot as an ambassador and doing charity work and speaking out against things like this. Even at you stretch it out to domestic violence, and then, of course, if she was the first one to come out as openly gay as a WWE superstar, that is also something right there that could be marketed. If you want to look at it with the pure business type of look at it, there's 3 things right there that you can market with this woman, and you didn't do any of that. You really didn't do any of that.
I wanted to also mention Oscar. I always say Oscar, but Oscar, has recently been posting on Twitter, I think, about people making overtures towards her and how it's inappropriate and how it makes her feel uncomfortable. And then she posted the second time saying it's still happening, etc., etc. So, I mean, it's one thing to be a guy on WWE TV or whatever it might be, but it always seems to be just a completely different kettle of fish when you're a woman. Especially in wrestling where, you know, the majority of fans are going to be men, and there's always going to be some unstable ones in any sort of fandom once you get to a certain size, I guess.
Yeah, but I want to remind the male wrestlers in the world too. Have you ever seen the movie? If you're young, you probably haven't. Fatal Attraction. Don't think that women aren't dangerous either if they're driven enough. Yeah, it is a double standard. There is a double standard in some ways, but getting back to her and everything, she's been through a whole lot, and I'm glad WWE gave her some time to hopefully. That's traumatic. How much time do you need? I mean, you never really get over anything like that. You're always looking over your shoulder, I'm sure. Even with her, you know, legitimate shoot background, it's still scary nonetheless that somebody can get to you or get that close to you in that way and invade, you know, look to invade your home. They invade where you live. They know where you live. They find you. They drive across multiple states. They're serious about what they want to do. They've been planning this. This is not it's a mentally unstable person with every intent to do this and plan it out. It was premeditated. So 15 years is very light for that if they got that plea deal, because this person is a true danger to society. Maybe too, I mean, it's just off with everything that we just said and the mental and emotional trauma that she's been through. Maybe she's still fighting that, and maybe the release or non-contract renewal was to give her time off the road, time away to kind of find something out in her life. Maybe it's temporary. I don't know. But it is weird that it's not based on you're not over, we have nothing for you. I can't imagine, I hope she's making a ton of money, but I can't imagine she was that much of a strain on the budget. So that's probably the most mysterious one out of everybody in the WWE group. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I'd say definitely. I mean, hopefully because they just didn't renew her contract, maybe it was a mutual thing. But we're going to move on to the rest of this list, and these were all not mutual things. These are all releases. Akam and Razor, the authors of Pain, and I don't even know why they were brought back. I mean, they did nothing on the main. I didn't see them in NXT, I'll grant you that, but they didn't do anything on the main roster in both of their stints, because they were fired in 2020, budget cuts, COVID, brought back in 2022, and then they were put with Paul Ellering actually came with them this time, and they were put with Karrion Kross and Scarlett. I've got that name right, haven't I?
Scarlett.
I always forget the girl's name.
Correct.
Yeah. Oh, God, my brain at the moment. I mean, that was always Temu Judgment Day anyway, and they never did anything with them. And then space on. What do you think about them? But I always just found they were just taking up space on the roster. They were just people.
I found this is the false positive of the NXT experience. You're over in NXT because the crowd is wanting everybody to get over. That's the way it's been there for a while. So Authors of Pain, there I said, I think Ascension should have done a lot better than Authors of Pain. Ascension had that NXT type of, the fans were behind them, but they got pigeonholed into saying they were better than the Road Warriors in their first promo, and like literally, and I feel like this here, that's why I said that about Ascension. They were a very talented tag team. They deserved more. The AOP was very lateral, or they regressed as time went on. They got worse. They seemed like very uncoordinated. They didn't seem safe either. Like we talked about finishes, like the Shaker Heights spike from way back. If you didn't see that clip. The Collider, you run these two guys across, which, by the way, held my breath every time, made me think of D'Lo and Droz. You're running them across, and their backs are hitting, and then you're giving them a regular powerbomb. And then there were other moves they did that were just not safe. You do them the locals is one thing, but once again, just like the Beverly Brothers, the main roster guys are looking at that going, I'm not taking that. You're not powerbombing that other guy on top of me. You're not doing this. And, even their finish with it was like, he spoke about Perry Saturn. Their finish was like a weak version of Total Elimination with the clothesline. the playground thing. You could take the legs and do this. Even when, who did it? The Midnight Express did it out of the corners and it looked really good. Remember? The high-low with the clothesline. But they definitely, this is where NXT is a false positive and it needs to be fixed. And I don't know if it ever will be, but they come up from NXT thinking they're over and then they just don't have any improvement when they come in there. And the second time around when they brought him back, I think it hurt Karrion Kross and his act because of, like you said, Judgment Day, Timu or Alibaba Judgment Day. And Karrion Kross is a loner, Killer Kross more specifically, if I'm looking at the past, is a loner. He has the woman with him, but truly he's a loner. He's one of those people that's mythical, but then you put him in the right to censor leader type of thing, cutting it just didn't make sense.
With Karrion Kross is its own interesting thing because I didn't like his character when he came back. I thought it was... They put all the production values in someone like Bray Wyatt for that, but then for Karrion Kross, they might do a bit of a weird filter, and it just looked like, well, you film this in 2 minutes in the backstage and you put a filter on it, and it looked like what it was. It always looked like a cheap version. And with Karrion Kross, this isn't about Karrion, we'll skip him because I'm going to go to Paul Ellering in a second. Karrion Kross shows more personality sat in his hotel room filming skits than he does on TV. And I almost wonder if he's the same as Luke Gallows and Carl Anderson. He's one of those guys who struggles to get his true personality onto the big screen, like a Brad Armstrong, who would be the archetypal sort of example of that. We'll talk about that in a minute, but we want to go to Paul Ellering here now, because through my research, I found out he's been released by WWE no less than 4 times. And you wouldn't even think he was there 4 times, but he was with the Road Warriors for a few months, with Rocco, the dummy. Then he was with the DOA in 98. That's one of the forgotten people that was during the Attitude Era. And 2 different Authors of Pain stints as well. But when they went to the main roster at AOP the first time, Paul Ellering, if you remember, came to the entrance ramp with them, and basically AOP just shooed him away. And that was his entire main roster run.
And they were Seth Rollins
He's still a great
after that, right?
Yeah. He's 70, or near enough there at the time. He was after Dutch Mantel, Zeb Coulter, the oldest hire that WWE ever did. And he's still a good talker. He still looks good. He looks TV good. He's an interesting face and, a great voice and everything. Why never use him? Why put him in a group where he's the 6th most important person in it? Or 5th?
It's a strange thing because Paul Ellering is probably, in my estimation, the most underrated manager ever in wrestling history, as far as all those things. And he's a very unique guy from what I hear. I don't know if it's true or not. Could be urban legend about him running the Iditarod, the dog sled racing stuff. He has interesting hobbies and habits outside of wrestling that make him a very interesting person. I would like to sit down and talk to. You should interview him. That would be an amazing interview probably of that urban legend and other things people say about Paul Ellering. He's got to have an incredible mind for the business by default at this point with all the years that he's experienced and all the talent that he has probably helped out throughout the years. Not to mention back in the day, wasn't he another kind of Billy Graham-like look to him as a wrestler? He had longer blonde hair. He was jacked. He was a power lifter. I mean, he's a guy at 70. It looks better than us at our age. But there's got to be something this is a guy that should have been an agent. Maybe they did offer him something like that. And he just wanted to come in as talent and go home and not have the stress of any of the office stuff. But yeah, Paul Ellering should be somebody. I put him for what I've heard of Paul Ellering and his mind for the business and the way he could talk and coach and convey things. Would you put him right up there? Because I think I'd put him right up there with a Kevin Sullivan. Even though he doesn't have the booking experience, he's just somebody that's seen it all and can convey a lot of knowledge.
Paul Ellering as a manager, he's always one of those guys who obviously has bigger guys around him. And, with the newspaper, he's the kind of person who just goes, there's your enemy, sick him. And I was like that kind of manager. But also in real life, especially with the Road Warriors, he was their manager. He managed their lives. He managed their bookings, their flights, and especially Hawks. he made sure they got from A to B. So he was a true manager in that respect as well. He started in 77 in... Where did he start? Was it the AWA? Yeah, so Minnesota.
He's a Minnesota guy, yeah.
He started in the Vern Gagne camps in 77.
Yeah, he's a true Vern Gagne guy, which you can see what Minnesota produced, especially when it came to WWF at the time and then WWE. This is Kurt Hennig, Scott Hall, who else? Well, Colonel De Beers, that watch along is up there. He didn't go to WWF though. But just about everybody, Gene Okerlund, everybody in the 80s of WWF were taken in from AWA for the most part. AWA had a lot of people that came over.
Next one on the list is Blair Davenport. Just hadn't been used much, was mostly on the losing end when she was. Apparently, there's a lot of interest in her. She's maybe even still better known, maybe not better known now because she's been in WWE, but B. Priestley was her name in the Indies and AEW.
Yeah, I'm not familiar. Is she the one that had the big purse? Because I did Russo and Ben talk about big purse, and I think Blair Davenport was the purse.
Excuse me. She barely registered with me, so I can't remember. Cedric Alexander, the forgotten member of the Hurt Business. So he's they're supposedly interested in bringing him to AEW so they can get the Hurt Syndicate, the full group back together in AEW once again. But Cedric Alexander.
Well, I'll tell you what, I became a fan of Cedric Alexander when I saw him on the Cruiserweight Classic with, especially with Kota Ibushi. That's a match I watch during cardio sometimes. And that's kind of like, I look at that match and I'm saying to myself, man, that's kind of the way they presented the Cruiserweight Classic in itself and that match specifically. And Cedric got a shoot job out of that. Like he thought he was done, and they showed it on social media of Hunter coming out when they were saying something. The fans were chanting to hire Cedric. And Hunter came out from the curtain and basically did the point, or whatever at him. Basically, I'm gonna give him a job. But I was saying that match reminded me of what early AEW was and kind of lost its way as they went on. If people go back, and we should do a watch along maybe here on Patreon, Cedric Alexander versus Kota Ibushi in the Cruiserweight Classic was one of my all-time favorite matches. And the way Cedric sold, the way he worked with Kota Ibushi, and Cedric's underrated. When they put him in the Hurt Business, there's probably some people going, well, he's just a guy there to do jobs, or he's just a guy, and he probably was there to bump around and do whatever, but he stood out on his own. And when they came in as a group, they were stars. And that's why in the first time that they decided to cut that short, it was like, that was the stupidest thing ever. That was probably the most overact that they had from guys that in the past, Shelton, Cedric, and then you talk about Bobby Lashley and MVP, didn't really truly reach their full potential. But now it felt like they all together were going to rise up as singles and as the group act. And then they just cut it short. It was so stupid.
All of them have done interviews, I think, pretty much. MVP, Bobby Lashley. Everyone was unhappy with that. Everyone wanted to stay as a group because they were more than the sum of their parts were greater than, them individually, I guess. Now, next,
and the fans were
Luke
more
Gallows.
unhappy than anybody. The fans were more unhappy than anybody that they did it. They never responded to any of those guys except for maybe Lashley as much as they did when they were together.
And guess who's booking them right now? Tony Khan in AEW. They're pretty much the most overact because I make this point in another video I'm going to be releasing on my channel, which I forgot to plug, the James Romero channel, that they look like stars. They've got a combined age, those three guys, of 148. But they look like stars, they dress like stars, and they kick ass. What more could you ask for? And they're probably the most overact in AEW at the moment because they say things, then they do them, and they beat you convincingly, which is something sorely missing in AEW with their 50-50 back and forth matches.
Let me ask you this question while we're sticking on it, because this could be a clip all on its own. How do you think, because there is the Punk precedent, I don't know all the details, but the Punk precedent, when you have an actual star come into the company from WWE, and now these guys are being presented as stars as the group, and they are kind of running roughshod over the roster. What happens politics-wise? When do the knives start coming out if they haven't already? When do the EVPs? When does Tony's former favorites, unless they're not his favorites, any? You see what I mean? What's going to happen? Do good, but don't do too good. They're doing what they're supposed to do, but how's the talent going to react to that? Not that they care. I mean, what's the talent going to do? Those three guys could probably beat the entire roster up outside of a couple
Yeah, that was
guys.
exactly my point. Yeah, what are they going to do about it? Nothing.
Well, they can
Bucks.
They can do what the boys always do. They may not fight you one-on-one or say it to your face, but they'll death by 1,000 paper cuts or 1,000 head shakes of no, brother, I don't think so.
I think they're all veteran enough to just not. I think they'll get through that if it does happen.
But Tony Khan's not. Tony Khan's not veteran enough to realize.
Yeah. You might be right. I think they'll do well. I think they'll continue to do well.
We're gonna have you think brawl out with something. You try to take money out of Lashley's and MVP and Shelton's bank account, and you try to fuck them over. Jeez, bleep that out. You try to screw them over.
Bleep it out with a aha.
Aha. They're gonna ha on your face. No, those are three dudes nobody wants. Let them do their thing. Trust me. Trust me. All three of them. And if you think MVP is just a manager, watch some of his judo stuff and his jiu-jitsu. Nah.
Judo?
Yeah. What did I say? Judo.
Yes. You said judo.
No.
I was getting mystic.
Can you?
Anyway.
Just bring the Rocky icon up whenever my Philly accent with a number. with the number of Philly accent mess-ups.
Next one, alluded to them before, Luke Gallows and Carl Anderson. It's just two of those guys that they are so much more capable than WWE really. They're full of personality, and as I say, they might be two Brad Armstrongs, and that I think they've tried to do like skits with them in the past as well. I remember years ago they were dressed up like doctors.
Like nerds.
Or something like that, yeah.
Yeah, the nerdometer and everything. Stuff beneath what they can offer. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Completely, it just, they cannot on TV, or WWE cannot get their full personalities on screen. And they do the podcast, they're amusing, they're really funny dudes, quick and sharp and everything. Anyway, their second run, they did nothing. I mean, they were doing SmackDown dart matches and NXT when they were on NXT, and some main roster stuff over the course of over 2 years. Why even bring them back?
Well, they brought him back because of AJ. They're buddies with AJ, and I think they got buddy contracts. And that's fine. The money's there. It's whatever, but you're not going to give them an opportunity. You're going to pay them. Everybody's getting six figures now, downside, whatever, lower, mid six figures.
350 on main roster, yeah.
350. Oh, my God. Back in the day, you'd have to be world champion to make 350 back in the day. But great money. Hope they saved. Hope they invested. I'm sure they'll get another opportunity, if not here in the States, in Japan. Maybe they'll go back to TNA. They could use talent right now. But then again, if you're already contracted with WWE, which, you got to combine $700,000 in guarantees, maybe the release and allowing them to go to TNA to get over again, maybe for another run. I don't know. I don't know if, here's a question, and it's a question hopefully they're not going to do, but do you think with some of these releases that they will not allow them because now there's the working relationship with TNA, that essentially if you go to TNA, you're already kind of working with WWE?
I think they'd be thrilled. I think the opposite. I think they'd be thrilled if people they just release go to TNA, make a big impact, and then they can bring them back again. I think
no, that'd be great.
No problem.
I just don't know what politically, if it's like you got released, so we don't want you to have anything to do with us, because when they just say go to TNA, or you're released, go to TNA, and they show up at TNA before the release is announced, or just to keep them on TV. But they've also, by Gallows and Anderson, were a part of the TNA AEW type stuff, right? With the working relationship with Kenny Omega when he won the. So maybe they'll go back to AEW or go to AEW full time.
That was my point, because in 2021, I think they did a few appearances with AEW and they never got signed. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I think it was reported that someone had an issue with them, and that's why they didn't go to AEW. Well, it would have made sense at the time for them to go there, but say they go to, as I say, someone in the comments correct me if I'm right or wrong. Oh, by the way, I've got a correction in the middle of this. Last week at the Royal Rumble, we were talking about the Royal Rumble, and I said 2014 Royal Rumble, Batista won it, and Daniel Bryan was thrown out early. I've still got the Mandela effect. I could have sworn he was in the Rumble. Bryan Danielson was never in it. Everyone thought he was going to be number 30, and then he wasn't. And I think it was Ray.
It was Ray. Yeah.
Mysterious. Yeah. Apologies. A complete Mandela effect. I can still, in my mind's eye, see him in the Rumble. Which is anyway.
Well, I got a second correction since it's a segment. I meant to bring it up in the beginning. My esteemed colleague, my co-host, the boss of the show, James, was 100% right. I did work Chris Candido on that show in Revere, Massachusetts, not during, but the same show as the mass transit incident. And I was like, I can't remember that. And that was the only time I ever wrestled Chris Candido. And I figured if it wasn't memorable, it was my fault, not his. So I don't know where that came from. I just know that on every other show, it was either Little Guido or Axelrod. They were tied at my hip for those months leading up to the pay-per-view.
Hey, we had a lot to remember that day, in fairness. We're going to skip through a couple of these. Isla Dawn, she was tagging with Alba Fire. A bit more of a surprise because she was being used, even though it might have been on like main event. You know, she was being used fairly often. Duke Hudson, he was part of Chase U, and then Chase U disbanded. His was the most interesting reaction to a firing because then he posted a video of him interviewing himself, but without the effects of the Wyatt Six, I guess. As, you know, they were doing the same sort of similar thing, I guess, with Uncle Howdy. You know, just talking about how so many Australian stars have done really well in WWE and you've been binned off. And then, but here's one I do want to talk about, Giovanni Vinci. He was excommunicated from Imperium by Ludwig Kaiser back in April, and then they tried to repackage him as sort of like a playboy, sort of Dubai, almost influencer style, rich boy kind of thing. And instead they brought him to TV after 5 months, have Apollo Creed beat him twice, and then they just cut him. It's like, why?
He was saddled with the $1 Million Man, JBL, Alberto Del Rio gimmick, where you have to invest a lot of money to make the gimmick work. Yeah. So they see that. Once you see that, it's like, and I think that's why, on a side note, I think I mentioned it during the Charlotte Flair thing, they booed her. Those vignettes, if they showed the real vignettes of her working hard, rehabbing, showing true grit, all that stuff, instead of the people are mad at the rich people right now in the world. So you show that you could be a heel like this guy, but you got to put the money in. But then Charlotte comes back and wins the Rumble. And those vignettes, I think, put a bad taste in people's mouths. And of course, jumping to the front of the line when you've been investing emotionally in all the other female talent. That's my theory on that. That's why they continue to boo her. But the Vinci guy, I don't know why. Imperium was brought back as an act. You had all three guys. Him and Kaiser, and especially him, were in a position where you could bump and do jobs and protect definitely Gunther, but then protect Kaiser as he became more favorable to creative.
He's got a great face, hasn't he, that Kaiser?
Yes, he's a star. If there was no Gunther, I think Kaiser would have a more prominent role as a singles guy, maybe with vignettes, not this vignette, that this guy, it's like kiss of death. But there's got to be more to the Vinci thing, that they gave this to him and it was dead on arrival and he put Apollo Crews over in his debut match. There has to be something more to that. They don't just reverse course after the vignettes they put money into after one match. It's so weird. Did you get that?
After zero matches. Because he was booked to lose before he lost. So they knew they were just putting him out there to... I think you hit on something. Alberto Del Rio or Ted DiBiase or, to a point, JBL. Where were they on the card? Main event. If you're going to invest that money, you're going to be in the main event. And then you look at the third most popular member of Imperium, who were a trio. Are you going to then... He was always going to be destined for the mid-card, and then... They've got such a glut of talent at the moment. They probably just thought, well, maybe it's like a Sean O'Hare thing, right? So this is research for another video I'm doing for something else. Is Sean O'Hare, you know those great introduction vignettes he did, I'm not telling you anything you don't already know.
Yeah, it's kind of like Karrion Kross is doing right now.
Yeah. But with that being said, he couldn't translate that into a live setting, because with those pre-recorded vignettes, he had to do take after take after take after take. And then maybe it's the same thing with him. I don't know. Maybe they just thought, man, we're going through the motions, but it doesn't feel like it's working. And then they just sort of cut the losses. I mean, it is a lot of money, even for not for a billionaire, multi-billionaire, billion-dollar company, but it's still a lot of money to pump into something that you don't believe in. And so maybe they just went, forget it.
So why even do it in the first place? See, that's, for me, when I look at that, and he could have looked at those vignettes going, they are like the $1 Million Man, JBL, Alberto Del Rio. Well, look what happened to those guys. They have to do something with me. They don't. That's cool. But with the other thing that you're saying is he can get over. And that's going to be the overarching theme about these releases after we go through the list of all of them. This is creative's fault. You can make anybody a star. The guy's proven he can bump. He has the vignettes were good. They didn't translate into anything outside of a copycat of the $1 Million Man or other gimmicks, but you could have put a twist on it, but you didn't even give the guy a chance. At least back in the day, you get 3, 4, 6 weeks to get yourself over. They set you up to fail, but at least you got a chance. They didn't give this guy a chance, and then they release him, and they probably gave some reason, like obviously budget cuts are what the friendly thing if you're friendly with the office. But what if they told this guy you didn't get over, and this guy's walking around for however long, like a lot of former WWE talent that get released for no good reason, and they say you didn't get over, you just didn't get over. Like you said, you booked me to lose before my first match. What do you mean? It's such a mind F that it really does. I hope more than anything for any of these talents, do not carry it with you. Use it as an opportunity. Now it's up to you. But like I said before, the terrifying part is it's up to you. Can't blame creative, can't blame the promoter, can't blame your opponent, can't blame the fans. It's all up to you. I'll leave it at that.
Right, so we're going to do the AEW ones now, and trust me, we are going to be getting to Barely Legal. Don't worry about that. It might be an extra long version, extra long episode to sort of squeeze everything in, because we've got to do part 2 next week as well. So AEW releases. So this is the one that I mean, what else can you say? Bear Boulder, real name Thomas Windsor, former member of the Iron Savages tag team with Bear Bronson. Bear Boulder was arrested January 14th on the charge of battery by strangulation of his fiancée. The claim was that he put her on the floor and stood on her neck till she passed out. And then his fiancée also claimed that there's been about somewhere between 5 and 10 instances of domestic battery in the course of the relationship. Tony Khan rightly just looked at that and went, "See ya. You're done. Out you go." There's not really anything to add. He's not been tried yet, so we'll be watching that with great interest. The next 3 are all interesting because the 2 especially are because both of these people have asked for their releases and were turned down previously. So the first one, Ricky Starks, quite the surprise considering that he's finally been released. Because, I mean, how many times did he say he was being held hostage in interviews or made it clear he didn't want to be there? He asked for his release in late 2023, I believe. He was on TV for a few months longer with Big Bill as the tag team champions, and then he just vanished like a fart in the wind and hadn't been seen on TV for a year. He was more prominent on independent shots. He was pulled from a GCW show a couple of months ago, I think partly because of what Ricky Starks was saying in interviews, partly because of Effie, I believe, as well. But Ricky Starks, we'll talk about the Edge thing in a minute, or the Adam Copeland promo in a minute, but Ricky Starks, how much has he got to offer?
I believe Ricky Starks has a lot to offer. I think the number one thing we should talk about, because we talked about all these releases and everything, but we really didn't address the political disadvantages and advantages of why you get released. Ricky Starks is probably the person that's had the biggest political advantage now after his release, being best friends with Cody Rhodes. He'll get over. He might be NXT champion. He'll be fast-tracked. Guess what WWE has been doing better than anybody else? Making Tony Khan and AEW look stupid. Making them look like they wasted talent. And WWE, they've wasted a lot of talent. But then they go to AEW and they're wasted even further, or they've never been to WWE, but they're wasted in AEW. They go back. whatever the reason, for spite, to make Tony look like an idiot, to make AEW look second tier, that they don't know what to do with people, whatever the motivation is, being friends with Cody Rhodes will also help Ricky Starks, and WWE will shove it down AEW's throat each and every week that Ricky Starks, just like Jade Cargill was a bigger star before she even stepped in the ring with the way they presented her. Of course, they ruined it. They've currently ruined her, WWE, but they made her.
Where is she? Has she just been off TV?
She got attacked. Now? She disappeared. There was supposedly her and Bianca weren't getting along, like backstage, or there was stuff going on. All rumors and speculation, but there's a little bit of smoke with that fire, or fire with that smoke, however the kids say it today. So, but she's not been on TV, so there must be something, and they're not talking about an injury or anything. She was attacked backstage and gone. But I'm going to the very beginning. They made her look like the hottest. As a matter of fact, I might have said she's the hottest free agent in wrestling. Made her look like a big-time sports athlete star, superstar.
Yeah, but that's true. But AEW did do a really good job with her as well. They always put her in the squash matches. Yeah. She was champion, TBS or whatever it was, champion for nearly her entire run, it seemed. But then WWE capitalized on it, made an even bigger star of her. They made her
look good in matches. WWE made her look like a star before she even bumped one person. That's the important part. You remember getting out of the Escalade, meeting with Hunter, dressed like she's dressed like a star. I mean, there's people that come like, I wouldn't dress like, I had to get out of that and try to dress better. But when she stepped out of there, as ridiculous in the real world as it might look, to a wrestling fan, is like, oh my God, she's a star. Not to mention jacked in the best, like she looked like she could beat some of the dudes up. So AEW never did that. They put her out there. She looked great in matches, but did she really do anything cinematically, vignette-wise? These are the things, WWE, and these are the things that they missed with Ricky Starks and almost every other person. And we'll get to the other guy, too, that WWE messed up and probably will do it right this time, I hope, after we get done with Ricky Starks. But, yeah, he had a lot to offer. He was, though, and this is creative. I believe this is creative, not the wrestler's fault. He was exposed very badly, and you have it in your notes, with that Edge promo in the ring.
I'm not sure he was exposed as much as Copeland was. Or they sort of exposed each other. It all just fell apart.
Well, they can. It was the old adage of, why are you burying somebody that you have to put over? Or why do you have to bury anybody? You got to lift them up and make sure you both look like you're on a higher plane of existence. What I'm saying is that playground type of insults back and forth didn't help anybody. But I believe politically it hurt Ricky Starks more, because it feels like that was the beginning of the end.
Yeah,
right there.
Absolutely.
To maybe Edge or somebody went to Tony or someone in the office and complained. And maybe Ricky did go into business for himself. Maybe they didn't rehearse what they were going to say back and forth, because it did seem like off-putting on both ends to me. Did it seem that way to you?
Yeah, it's cringeworthy. But there's, I'm just reading what I've put. Edge calls him a Rock ripoff. It's like, there's worse people to rip off than The Rock, I mean, look at LA Knight. And then there's also, and then he calls him a vanilla midget. And it's like, you're insulting 2/3 of the locker room there with that one, buddy. But I think actually is Ricky Starks threw Adam Copeland off his game. And then he comes with these Kevin Nash level insults back. And then it's just right at the end of it where Ricky Starks goes, oh, that sent me over the edge. And then it's just Edge just goes, oh, dude. And then it sort of gets back on track afterwards. And the weird thing is Christian sat right behind Ricky Starks the entire time. I'm wondering what he was thinking, because obviously he's Adam Copeland's best mate, or one of his best friends.
Yeah.
But yeah, ever since then. And then, okay, here's the thing. In fact, we'll come back to Ricky Starks in a minute, because our next one's Miro, Rusev. The last anybody saw of the former Rusev was when he beat Andrade, World's End 2023. And then Miro beforehand was involved in a horrendous storyline with his real-life wife, CJ Perry, Lana, in WWE, for those who remember, where and she was hot and flexible, where she was managing other people against Miro. And no one knew why. No one knew why she was there. No one knew why she was doing these things, and then she disappeared and got fired very quickly afterwards. So 2023, he was barely there. 2024, he was non-existent. 2025, up until a couple of days ago, he was still with the company. My point is, we'll get to his booking in a minute. My point is, with Ricky Starks and Miro, how bad must AEW be as a company to work for? When they pay you well, they sit you at home and give you nothing to do, so you can just have all this free time. Why are people looking a gift horse in the mouth here?
Hey, if you want to send some of that money to the Stevie Richards show, James and myself would love to sit at home and make hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. I don't know. The Miro thing is kind of, he in WWE definitely didn't do himself any favors when they got on social media and announced they were getting engaged, and they started exposing the gimmick they had with her playing Drago's wife and him being a Drago-like character was perfect. The mystique, it was there, but when they started doing stuff on social media to expose it, well, they're doing it. Everybody's doing it now, so they were ahead of their time. They're doing it. They would have been perfect for the media scrums after the pay-per-view to say we're not really Russian or any of that stuff. So my real name's this. Call me by my real name and all that stuff. But this is going to be something where if Miro does go back to WWE, which I think he should as Rusev, I think that would be, with the new regime and the way they do the production and everything, what they could really do. Man, you thought it was something, him coming out in that tank at WrestleMania 31, I believe, at Levi Stadium against Cena. They can give him that level of entrance for the first few weeks and make him a huge star again. They can make him a huge star before he even gets on TV.
But his music used to be great as well. It was real.
It was your military marching
Soviet
type of music. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, his thing in AEW from day one, the best man, remember? Is that what he did? And he showed himself.
I can't remember.
He was the best man.
They booked him strong, man. But he never went to the main event.
After that, but his debut was, I believe, was it Kip Sabian? And he was the best man, and he had blonde hair. He was not the Rusev that and then there was something where he talked about playing video games and everything. Like, literally killed all the mystique.
Do you know he was... Yeah, because he was with Billy Mitchell. You know, the Pac-Man cheater guy.
Oh, yeah, the evil Billy Mitchell.
They actually did a vignette with him and Billy Mitchell.
King of Kong, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, King of Kong as well, but yeah, I don't think he cheated at Pac-Man. I think that's wrong. But
no, the documentary was King of Kong, I think, right?
Yeah, I used to love that. Oh no, there's still a thing with him and Carl Jobs that I'm really interested in. I'm just looking at.
He's still suing everybody. He's in 2025. He put something out.
Yeah,
he's still got the mullet, the beard. He lives here in Florida too.
Yeah, he. Oh, you need to do an interview with him, man. I'm just having a look. So he made his. Yep, Kip Sabian. You're absolutely right. Against Joey Janela and Sonny Kiss.
That's how you bring Rusev in. You see what are we doing here? You're not having him attack Cody Rhodes right off the bat, or your top babyface, or going, I don't know if Wardlow was even a thing then, but you don't have that monster type of versus monster thing.
That was his own thing, right? So do you remember they tried to bring Miro back? Oh, sorry, they advertised him and Keith Lee and a couple of others for a meat match. Just the meatiest guys on. And Tony Khan never actually bothered to find out that he was injured and Keith Lee was still on medical leave, so they just cancelled it straight out. It's like, this is the kind of thing that you see if someone's available first, and then you book something. But anyway.
Well, Tony couldn't do his 60-second concussion protocol in that case?
Oh, Lord, yeah. Follow the pen.
It didn't work. I was looking down. See, I failed. CT did. Sorry, Chris Candido. I did wrestle
medical leave.
I did wrestle you.
He always seemed to be top of the mid card, but he was really dominant. Was it like the TBS title? I think he was, or TNT. I can never remember which one's the men's and which one's the women's. But that being said, there's one more on this list. Malakai Black. He's another one who apparently has been quite vocal, wanting to leave for a while, but the leader of the House of Black since its inception, 2021. His contract was originally going to run through 2027, so he must have signed an extension at some point, but. These are some of the workhorses that you could really do something with. All three of these guys that are desperate to leave, and they're handing back this free money because they just don't want to be there anymore. He was Malakai Black was with the company, used well up until I think November, and then he just disappeared off TV. And granted his release. There's two questions here. What do you think of Malakai Black's chances away from AEW And 2, why do you think Tony Khan's had a change of heart?
I want to answer your second question first, because that's the biggest mystery of all. What has happened to change Tony Khan from holding on to these wrestlers? Because he's held on to most of them for months, if not years, to have them be this unhappy. Malakai Black, or Aleister Black, as he's probably going to go back to WWE and be known as, they failed multiple times with him. I love when he first came in, I even loved the story time vignettes that were really well done. And I think that was a Jeremy Borash, Jimmy Paradise type thing, like the cinematic type stuff with the opening up of the book and the drawings. Very well done. I think the WWE has a problem, and the Wyatt Six is something that proves it. Karrion Kross is somebody that proves it. Outside of The Undertaker and Kane, they have a real issue getting and keeping mythical characters over. This is the Pentagon thing I talked about, with that. He should be a mythical character and really a lot of mystique. We knew nothing about The Undertaker and Kane outside of what the commentators told us. And it was very little for a long time. We had to organically learn week by week, or sometimes we wouldn't learn. It would just be more mystique, more anticipation, more mythical type of acts. I don't know if they're going to get Aleister Black right. Maybe the 4th time now in WWE. The 4th time he did 3 different runs in WWE. Remember, he did the thing where he turned on Big E, and then he was gone a couple weeks later, right? During the COVID era.
Too far back for me to remember.
He did a big turn on. He did well sometimes. I don't even remember. I wrestled Chris Candido. I remember who Aleister Black wrestled, but not myself. But he did a turn on Big E, and then he was released not long after that, which was a mystery. He's one of the ones that actually was able to keep most of the Aleister Black gimmick, change it to Malakai, and Tony Khan had a WWE property without getting sued in the palm of his hands, and he ruined it. I don't get it. He's right up there with a Sting or a Darby Allin or whatever. You can book him very strong in a way. But he was also at the end, like he started off, he kicked Cody Rhodes. That was a strike. That's what should have happened with Miro. Everybody gunning for Cody or other people. And even saying WWE sent him in a way, like the Outsiders type thing, to take out Cody for talking crap or doing the sledgehammer on the throne. There could have been a whole lot of ways you could have went with this. But with Malakai Black, he's had a regression in his character, not his work, going from a singles, then in the group, then being relegated to 6-man tags. That's all I've seen him towards the end. Nothing that featured him. And now they're trying, I think they're going to try to push Brody King to kind of take that place, right? Mm-hmm. Brody King's kind of become a push of a killer, or maybe he's replacing the Miro gimmick of being a killer on the TV show. But I don't know. It seems like with these kinds of gimmicks, I would say if Miro and Aleister Black both go back to WWE, Miro's got a better shot as Rusev of getting over and picking that momentum back up. Because like you said, they got the Sean O'Hare gimmick, which is basically what Aleister Black was doing, those really cool vignettes. But how does that translate into a pro wrestling universe? It's hard to do. The Wyatt Six aren't even on TV. So this guy could come back, be on TV for a month, and then be right back to where he was. And I don't want that for anybody, because Tommy End, which is his real work name from before, from over there in Europe, an incredible worker. What do you do if you can't get that guy right? And Miro, what are we doing?
Just because you mentioned the Dark Order, all these guys have now finally been released, but I just want you to know that Evil Uno is still hired.
Isn't Dr. Luther still there too?
Dr. Luther's still there as well. Man, some of these people are still on the...
Well, Dr. Luther is really tight with Jericho, right? They have a history together. I don't know about Evil Uno.
Luther? I think he might just be under Luther. There, he's just under Luther. But goodness me, some of the people they've still got on the...
But is it a budget thing? Who's making what?
Who the heck is Nick Comoroto?
Nick Comoroto.
Man. Okay, let's. We should just go through and just try and figure out who a few of these people are. Preston Vance. Man, they've got a lot of people on here who just don't appear very often. Okay.
You know who hasn't been on TV in forever? And one of them, I'm actually pretty good friends with over the years. Haven't spoke with him in a while, but I really like the Butcher and the Blade.
I'm just going to bring them up, in fact. I'm staring right at him now, the Blade, in fact.
Yeah, Butcher and the Blade. I remember meeting them in Buffalo at an ECW show. I wrestled William Collier, which basically looks just like Big Cass, but I don't know who would be better and whatever, but a hell of a worker. And I sat down with both of them, and this guy, I remember looking at him, the Butcher guy, I think his name's Andy, his real name. He was a big, bulky guy and everything, but I remember them getting pushed and then him getting in incredible shape and also shaking off all the greenness and the inexperience. And that's because of Pepper Parks, the Blade. But Pepper should have been pushed a lot more. He was pushed in Impact as, I forget his name. It wasn't Pepper Parks. It was he was him and Cherry, but they were a different name. Was it Brandon something? Might have been his real name. I don't know. But he was pushed in Impact for a short time. And AEW has not done anything with that team at all. And she was the bunny in TNA. That was AEW. So it's a weird thing, too. When you're in the early part, I know this from Extreme Rising. That's why I didn't want to be champion, the first champion, because it's the worst spot. But when you're getting pushed early in a company's existence, and they're trying to find their identity, trying to find their legs underneath them, all that stuff, you're kind of in a terrible spot because you'll be pushed aside for the new toys eventually. And this is the pattern that happens all the time.
Braxton Sutter.
That's the name, Braxton Sutter.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's Andy Williams and Braxton Sutter. There we go. I'm just going to actually see if... no, his real name's actually Jesse Guillemot? Guillemot? It's a French name, I think.
Michael McKellicuddy? There's a relation to that?
Me. Wow, someone actually gave him that name. Right, we're going to move on to what went wrong, and then we're going to get to barely legal. So this, what went wrong, has absolutely nothing, no bearing on ECW. We're going to be saving that till next week. But this is Kevin Nash versus the Giant. This was something on my list that I've wanted to do for ages, and I thought, why not today, if nothing else? There didn't seem to be any major botches in WWE or AEW in the last week, so we thought we'd do something from back in the archives. So there's 3 different versions. Kevin Nash actually powerbombed the Giant 3 times on video that we know of, but Steve is going to take us through the ones that went right and the one that went wrong.
All right, thank you, James. We're going to take a look at this right here. And I have to say, this is so impressive. And Kevin Nash doesn't get enough credit. Paul White doesn't ever get enough credit. And we will always give both guys credit on this show when it's deserved. And in this case, it's what went right. And I want to give people a little bit of context to somebody who's given power bombs, taken very few, because for me, it was always incredibly scary to sit up and look over somebody's head, because I was always afraid I was going to fall forward, they were going to fall back. It's a really weird feeling when you're sitting up and you can see the crowd right here, and your eye, you look like you're 100 feet in the air, and you know you're going backwards. You know to tuck your chin, but it's still a pretty scary bump at any weight, any height. But for guys that are this size, especially the guy that's getting power bombed at his size, it's incredibly, look at it, how impressive. Paul White sits up better for a power bomb than I do. A guy that weighs 400 pounds can sit up better right there. He didn't go all the way over to look past him where his legs would be right here. But dare I say it, if he did that, they would fall back, because the transfer of all this weight going in that direction is pretty crazy. Look at right there, the reaction of the referee.
Is that
Brian,
the guy from Smoking Mountain, Brian Hildebrand.
Yes, it is.
Mark
Rest
Curtis,
in peace to him. Yes, it is. Boom. Oh, Kevin, did you see that little Easter egg there?
No.
Kevin goes down and sells. I don't know if he was working his stomach. I thought he sold his back. Like the WrestleMania 3 tore at both his biceps. Hogan slam on Andre sell.
Mm-hmm.
But that is a hell of a sell that the powerbomb took something out of Kevin as well. You can't get much more right than that. Just the height that he's sitting and the bump. And that crowd reaction, that's the one thing. I figured everybody would be on their feet for that. Especially like when Goldberg goes for the jackhammer before he even hooks the arm, fans are on their feet. They're seeing something here they usually don't see. Let me see. Yeah, these fans should all be on their feet right now. I know Scott Hall is probably shoot excited or cheering him on like, you can do it, Kev. You can do it. That's amazing.
Do you reckon like a lot of the fans just assume that he wouldn't have even attempted it?
But the fans should be like, there's no way he's going to attempt it. Well, wait a minute. He's, setting him up for the jackknife. There's no way he's going to get him up. And usually you'd have the fans standing up to look, you know what I mean? To get a closer look, or they just stand to be like, oh my God, is he going to do it? That's a surprise to me. That's what went wrong in this, that the fans didn't take in that moment like they should have. That's incredible. I like the WCW right to censor logo right there.
Yeah.
There you go. Hey, I don't mean anything by that, Mike Rotunda. I've seen you versus Death Row. I'm total respect to Mike Rotunda. I got to cover all my bases. So this is a Germany revenge tour, right?
Yeah, June. I think it's June of 1997. So this is about 4 months after.
Ooh, that one was close. Even with IRS standing in the way. He did not sit up like he looked like he gained a little bit more weight in this one, obviously. And even in the sold out clip that we're going to play next, it looks like he was a little bit bigger than he is now. And it looks like it's a lot of lower body stuff, like core area, thighs, all that stuff. That's the hardest part when you're trying to sit up with that. So still a great power bomb. He still cleared him. It's not like he just dropped him. So it's still incredibly athletic. Look at the shape Scott Hall's in. Jeez. Good Lord. I wish I was in that kind of shape. Yeah. Right there. There's Mickey J refereeing right there. Man, gotta go back on that one. Did he injure his neck on this?
No.
He's lucky. You know whose fault this is?
No. I would have suspected Paul White's for putting on so much weight so he can't sit up.
Yeah, I mean, Kevin's got him. He's got the lock right there. You might be accuse him of being a little bit high, that he should be more towards like the hips right there. But if Paul sat up like that Germany one, he still didn't get him up like he got him in the first one, but he sat up enough to where he dropped him there. This here is definitely the weight gain, but he just, I don't know. Like here, the legs are still up in the air and not like folded over the shoulders. Man, this could have turned out really, really bad right here. If I would have assumed that he had some kind of neck injury, a stinger. Obviously didn't break his neck because he was still on TV after this. Kevin's checking on him right away, right there. 100%.
Kevin was the one who was injured. He injured his back. So if you go back to the bit where he's sort of like trying to yoke him up, can you see like an extra bit of strain with Kevin Nash's back, because he did injure himself doing this? So he is trying to protect him as best he can.
I think the injury probably occurred this dead area right here, trying to hoisted, you know what I mean? The hips came forward. That's what I could assume from experience of deadlifting wrong. Me, not Kevin. My assumption is the deadlifting right here, where he tried to throw his hips forward to get him up. Because usually what happens is when you do power bomb, you pick the guy, you see he had his set up, he almost double pumped, you squat down a little bit, and then you come up, and then when the person clears and you know they're sitting up straight or as straight as they can get, your hips are underneath them. They're up here, and you almost do that deadlift motion to straighten your body out. You stiffen it to where you can drop them down. So that's where I believe it kind of went wrong. This is where Kevin was going to stand up with him, but you see how Paul did not sit up. Like usually Kevin's hips would come forward there when Paul clears that, but that didn't happen. So I did that with Dreamer. Drop my pen. I got scared. I did this with Dreamer during a tag match with Raven against him and Shane. I picked him up. I did it completely wrong. It was my fault, and Tommy got dropped on his head. In this case, it's the opposite, because Tommy tried to sit up. I just didn't have a good enough hold of him. Kevin has a good hold of Paul here, but Paul just cannot sit up. That's where it goes wrong. And you know what I think it might be? When he goes to sit, see how the arms, usually what I do is try to push my arms forward so my body follows. What happened with Paul was his arms came up and then his arms came right back down. And he got stuck and he wasn't going anywhere. And in this position, he can't flip over back to his feet. There's too much weight, and probably Kevin's back is already straining. So if Kevin injured his back doing the move, and Kevin would know better about what happened calling it, during it, and of course after it. So if I'm wrong about anything, Kevin, it's my fault. But right here, Kevin is trying to protect Paul, injures his back trying to protect him and get him up to clear so he can properly, at least for the most part, give him the power bomb. And Paul is just dangling. So Kevin didn't let him, in my guess, Kevin didn't drop him on his head. Kevin's back got hurt right then and there, and he couldn't hold him, and he just kind of let him down. Like, see, he didn't drive him. He didn't keep the clasp. He's like, his back just gave out, and see, just said, like, I got to let him go. So he didn't drive him down. He just, back gave out, and then, of course, Kevin's just laying there. And I bet you Kevin, even with his back screaming, was checking on Paul to make sure he's okay. So I would put more of the blame on the Giant, on Paul, not sitting up for Kevin, and then Kevin suffering that back injury. And thank God, I think Kevin would also say, yeah, I hurt my back. It sucked. But thank God that he didn't get his neck broken. So it was kind of the least wrong that what went wrong could go. That's the way I look at it.
Okay, then from last week, we were talking about the ECW Barely Legal pay-per-view, or more specifically, the controversies that were leading up to that show that got it pushed back 6 months, including the crucifix angle and the mass transit incident and other things of that ilk. This show, or the rest of the time we've got for it, because we were talking a lot about WWE and AEW, is going to be dedicated to the day itself, and we're going to do some reviews and some talking about some of the matches as well. And then next week we're going to be talking about sort of the pay-per-view, or the rest of the pay-per-view we don't get to today. We're going to be reviewing all of that tomorrow, including Stevie in the semi-main event for the ECW World Title #1 contendership, I guess you'd call it, in the triple threat match with Terry Funk and Sandman. But that's for next week. This week, once again, just before we get to the show itself, there was a banquet held the evening before Barely Legal, honouring Terry Funk, who announced he'd soon be retiring again. What are your memories of the banquet, and especially what were your memories of New Jack ruining that banquet with a 40-minute promo while dressed as Huggy Bear?
Well, I believe I was up there on the, the main table thing where you have the podium where Terry or whoever's speaking, including New Jack, had a speech. Maybe prepared, maybe not prepared. I think he was just basically going off the cuff there. That's my assumption. I was there for that. I do remember that. I remember being nervous for my speech with Terry because I really wanted to do the most I could to honor Terry and speak about that. I don't even know if we knew he was retiring or not. I can't recall if that was something that took everybody off guard when he announced it. I think it took the fans off guard, of course, but I can't remember the roster knowing or not knowing and what the reaction was. But I do know one thing after that speech where he said he was retiring. I was like, we really have to make Terry look good at the pay-per-view. We really, really. And in that estimation up to that point, everybody assumed Terry was going over. But I think there was still plan B, plan C to see if like Paulie to say explore other options with it. They were not like full sit down for hours, I'm sure, but you got to look at all three guys in the match. But of course, the most simple solution is, Dutch would say, give them what they want. This was one of those things, give them what they want. And it made that night, we didn't know how many retirements were coming after that, but that night and then the pay-per-view, it made it even more special that Terry won the world title that night. So, and we hope, Salmon and I believe, did the match justice, did Terry justice, as well as the match. And of course, the Raven stuff, I didn't know how much time they were supposed to have. We can talk about that after, we watch it a couple more times. I don't know if it was planned to have that match go that short, but I believe everybody else had gone over their time. So they were severely cut in the world title. And it was for, in the end, it was for a good reason that it happened because the post-show Transformer explosion. So,
that's all going to be for next week. Future episode, but we can tell you what future episode it is next week. We'll be talking about that. I'm just looking at Terry Funk eventually lost the title to Sabu. Spoiler, he won it at Barely Legal. And then the week after, Sabu and Terry Funk do a triple threat match where Shane Douglas wins, which I hadn't realised how short a time that Sabu was ECW champion there. But anyway, the story for another day. Now,
I didn't even know he was ECW champion. That's
for 8
weird.
days. Yes. There you
wow.
go. The banquets, as well as Barely Legal itself, backstage, as well as in the arena as well, I believe, was being filmed not only by ECW's camera crew, but by a chap called Barry Blaustein. So he was filming, the banquet. That's how with Terry Funk standing at the table, I'm done, I'm retiring, etc. And then all the backstage stuff, including the Paul Heyman speech and everything else, which we'll get to soon as well. Beyond the Mat. You watched it. I'm presuming you've watched it several times. I mean, it was required viewing back in the day for fans like myself to, get a real true glimpse of what pro wrestling was all about back in the day. What were your opinions of... Let's talk about actual Barry and his crew hanging about these shows. Were you suspicious of them? Was everyone welcoming to them? Did they think, you get a big break from appearing on the big screen?
No, I had no idea about any of that. I just needed to get through that night. The banquet, first of all, and make sure I can put words together. I was very nervous. And then actually wrestling that match and doing the best that we all could do to honor Terry in that fashion with the world title win. I wasn't aware. There were so many foreign type things happening. You're talking about a satellite truck. You're talking about wires. We didn't have the exposure to a WWE, anywhere close to a WWE level production. And this wasn't that, but it was definitely further away from Ron and Charlie on cameras, a hard camera and a handheld, and let's just figure it out. And Paulie will do his editing magic afterwards, and we just have the show we're going to have. This was supposed to be running. We did the Raw in Manhattan Center. I'm trying to find that footage, by the way, still the backstage footage. We did things, and this is Raven once again, and Paul to a degree. We started trying to hit times, even on house shows, even at TV tapings or whatever. Raven had told me, and lots of people were telling people who didn't know, you need to work on hard time now. If you're going to go 8, you got to go 8. If you're going 12, you got to go 12. It's hard to nail that down and it takes experience. So we had a little bit of preparation in hitting our times. I don't think everybody on the pay-per-view did. So getting back to that, looking around and seeing extra cameras, seeing cabling, seeing all this stuff, it was all blur of foreign production. So Barry Blaustein, I wasn't even aware he was there filming for us, filming for Beyond the Mat, or filming for something completely different, a local news crew. We didn't know. So someone might have said, oh, he's filming a documentary, but man, I was so like, I got to get through this match, because I infamously said earlier in the day when we're sitting around talking a match, and then, by the way, we were getting there at 3-4 p.m., which was also pretty much earlier, especially if you travel with Raven, you're an hour late. So I'm sitting there, and I remember, Sandman's talking about spots and stuff, and Terry's talking, and he just looks at me, and I'm staying very quiet. And he's like, well, what are you thinking, Stevie? And I was like, well, what the hell am I doing here, man? I'm like, I was still in awe at the opportunity, and it didn't weigh on me any less that Tommy he wasn't even on the show outside of the commentary. There were so many people. Rob Van Dam, we're going to talk about that he started to become Rob Van Dam. That was the birth of what people know. You saw a little bit. He only did the thing like once or so, and I was like, wow, that was like, you saw that character born at the pay-per-view. So there's so many people that didn't reach their full potential, and I'm here kind of wondering how I got into this spot. So, that was my focus, not Beyond the Mat or anything like that. I do think one of my favorite scenes, and it shows the phoniness of Hollywood, in case people know, spoiler on that as well, when New Jack was auditioning for the casting agents, and then New Jack leaves, but the cameras are still there, so they still have to play up the BS Hollywood stuff. They're like, I don't see him as Denzel, but I see him as Denzel's friend. It always stuck with me. It's such a BS line that he had. So weird. I mean, I don't know if I could be, whose friend would I be? Would I be Christian Bale's friend? Could I be Robin? I don't know.
Yeah, you could do.
Who knows? I'm good enough being James's sidekick. I'm okay with that.
On the Stevie Richards show, how are you my sidekick on this?
Cross out the Stevie Richards, put James Romero.
I guess so.
There you go.
Right. Okay. Let's talk about Beyond the Mat then, because it's so like the real life version of The Wrestler in the fact that a lot of the footage is just really concentrating on the most depressing aspects of what pro wrestling can be. And I know there's a lot of them, but, it's Jake Roberts, hunting around for crack pipes and looking like shit after, and he's like 42 and he looks like that. He looks better now in his 70s or whatever age, or late 60s, whatever age he is now. But, I mean, there's the big, fat, scummy promoter, the indie promoter, which I know there's a lot of them.
Roland Alexander from APW. I know my buddy Donovan Morgan trained under him. Mike Modest, a bunch of guys. Great Khali was there for a little bit. Huh? Roland Alexander.
Is he a scummy promoter? He just looked like one.
Oh, God, man. Yeah. Oh, allegedly. So I love, my favorite scene in that is sitting there with the dad and the prospect, the potential student, sitting on the couch, and he's sitting there with his stomach literally over the desk going, do you read the nutrition labels on food? Mm-hmm. You remember that?
Mm-hmm.
And then Tony Jones and Mike Modest, and he was going to get a piece of their contract and all that stuff, and they had a dark match in WWE and didn't quite make it. Tony Jones, rest in peace. There's just a lot of guys didn't. Yeah, he's gone. He died.
Yeah. I was going to bring that the same up to you. I think he died last year.
Yeah. It's a shame.
Yeah, Mike Modest was someone.
A guy.
I'm sorry. I was going to say Mike Modest is someone who you just constantly hear the name of, but never really made it to any of the big promotions. He'd be like a low promotion in like Japan maybe, or whatever it was.
Well, he teamed with Donovan Morgan over there in Japan. They were a pretty formidable tag team and had success over in Japan. But that's a grind, and those are 2-3 week tours. The flights alone will make you want to drink. The flights alone are brutal. And, then the culture shock, even if you go over there a few times, culture shock, away from your family, away from your routine. And it's never, you can make money in Japan, but it's not the same type of success or notoriety or long-term memorable moments to fans that you're going to get in the States with an American promotion.
Do you think it was a bit disingenuous, the documentary as a whole, or do you think it was a fairly realistic portrayal of what wrestling was like in the late 90s at that point? When I say disingenuous, I mean just focusing too much on the negatives.
It just might have been what Barry was filming, because Barry caught the positives of ECW with the pay-per-view and people talking and everything. And
Mick Foley with the Royal Rumble. Yeah. I mean, that ended up being a negative in the end, yeah.
Yeah. I think he just was letting the cameras roll. I mean, I would dare say Wrestling with Shadows with Bret Hart had a little bit more of a, it was booked a little bit more than this. This was just, I just can't believe, I don't know, was Jake really that messed up that he let Barry film all that stuff? I don't know what, I mean, he wasn't in his right mind, I'm sure, but the amount of access that Barry and the crew had to Jake's personal life, the drug use, showing him in such a light, and then the stuff with the daughter. And I mean, that's a lot of stuff to put out there way back. And it's great. Jake's doing great. Like you said, he looked 70 then. He looks more like 42 now than he did then.
Yeah.
So, it's crazy. Then the draw stuff with Vince, and that turned into an unforeseeable tragedy after that. So there's a lot of stuff that, I don't know Barry personally, but I don't think he was out to expose the deep-seated underbelly. He seemed like a genuine wrestling fan, and that's in the opening was the little kid, the Barry Blaustein child, sitting there in front of the TV with the heroes and the villains. I don't think he meant to do that.
Is it just a fact that a lot of pro wrestling is depressing in the back?
Yeah, at that time, maybe that was the first exposure to. You had your secrets of pro wrestling exposed.
Oh, with Harley Race as the unnamed booker and Salem the Cat voicing it over. Stunned Granny. How's that for driving Miss Daisy?
Hey, I was stunned Granny when my back went out a few weeks ago, but I wasn't winking or getting up.
Sorry, pile driving.
Yeah,
Miss
you had
Daisy.
one of the pit bulls. Yeah, you had.
I messed up.
Look at this pencil neck geek. Can you believe that people buy this crap? My favorite part is we need to reenact that with the fog machine, with the wrestling ring. The Corvette shows up, and even the girl has the mask on, all that stuff. Hey, one of the pit bulls was the guy with the bird cage on his head, by the way.
What? Was he?
That was one of the pit bulls.
Oh, right. I'm writing this down for Patreon.
We're going to watch along on that, Secrets of Pro Wrestling.
Yeah, I'm doing it right now.
He'll get him. He's taking his eye out. Or is he?
Do you know what else we should watch? We should watch the Jesse Ventura story from late 90s, and they have back in the day, and it's like a made-for-TV movie of 60 minutes and 90 minutes, and they're trying to reenact wrestling from the 70s, and it's starring Goldberg and ladders and stuff and ravens in it.
Oh, I got to see that. I've never heard of that.
Yeah, we need to. I need to hunt out the Jesse Ventura story from back in the day.
But you know what? Going to go to Barry real quick. Just my impression. I don't know the guy. Had very limited. I know I shook his hand and introduced myself. He came off very much like not a 1-to-1 ratio, but Bill Apter. Bill Apter has a very genuine love for the business, still almost childlike, which there's nothing wrong with that, and has fun with it. And Barry kind of gave me that impression, and he wasn't meaning, but he filmed what he had. What are you going to do? Cut it? You would cut out 75 to 80% of the movie if you left all that stuff out.
What were the boys' reaction to it? What were the other wrestlers' reaction to it?
I honestly couldn't tell you. Shane would probably be more of a person. You're not going to hear it since I stole his show. Sorry about that. But Shane or other people that had more experience. You got to think, guys like me, Meanie, Nova, lots of people. This was our first, I'm not talking about even we never had a live TV. This was our first pay-per-view, our first live initiation into the wrestling business. As far as this was like having my first match all over again. So I was laser focused. I wasn't hearing any they might have been saying stuff. And, ECW was a very protected locker room, too. So I'm sure Paul had to smarten Taz up, Perry, Bubba, Dreamer, everybody in there to kayfabe, too, because kayfabe was still somewhat alive. I remember I was sitting with Meanie and Nova, but maybe we were sitting around baby faces and no heels. Then when we were watching the monitor, there was that part where I was out there and they had the monitor and they were doing things. And then they were like, they got to go home. They got to go home. And somebody said, oh, somebody told Stevie, and I told Terry and Sam, we have to go home. That was the extent of maybe me being in the documentary. I don't know about anything else.
One more thing that is captured by the documentary that we want to talk about, because I'm sure you received 100 of these or more in your lifetime with ECW, is the Paul Heyman speeches. When did these start? Was this as soon as Paul took over ECW, Eastern Championship Wrestling, did he start doing these giant speeches before shows, or was this something for Barely Legal, or did they just ramp up over time?
I don't recall any speeches like this one. For all I know, this could be the one and only speech, but I believe when things happen, like previous to that, there might have been a speech about possibly losing a pay-per-view because of the mass transit thing, or there might have been something about we got taken off TV. There would definitely be something about we're on a new TV network, or we're in Florida or whatever. It wasn't like this. This was a Paulie motivational speech that will live throughout the history of wrestling. It still does. We're talking about it in 2025. One of the greatest promos you'll ever see or hear, ever. And I do believe it was from the heart. It has to be genuine. Paulie was trying to get us not to run through walls. Now these motivational speeches, by the way, when he was producing me or anybody else, he would give individual speeches like that. But as a group, they weren't as often as people, I guess, think they would be. But this one right here was I was trying to think of an analogy for the dance, because this is the dance. But this promo was the motivational speeches of motivational speeches. It didn't make us go out there and want to work any harder, want to kill ourselves any more, want to run through any extra walls for Paulie, but it centered and focused us on the fact that we had a hell of an opportunity and the world will be watching. And all the tests to see if we would succeed or fail as talents, promo-wise, match-wise, whatever was given to us, this was the dance. This was the final test to see if we could, on a live pay-per-view, deliver everything we delivered in the tape form and fashion. And I think everybody did.
Now let's get to the show itself. Barely Legal, buy rate 0.26, so that means around 40,000 buys, I believe. So above a 0.20 would have been deemed break even or a success. Pay-per-views were $20 or probably $19.95 at the time. The show generated a reported $400,000. The attendance, of course, was a sellout, 1,170. And a fun fact is that it nearly wasn't a sellout because front row at the time, and people will laugh, I mean, even with inflation, front row at ECW's first pay-per-view was $100 a ticket, which, just for an average Raw now, you're looking at $3,000. $40 per ticket getting price. The show drew $66,000 in ticket sales. I keep saying there's one more thing before we get to the show. There are quite a lot of people backstage. I don't know if you noticed some of the WCW guys. I believe there was a Nitro being taped the next night in the Core State Spectrum the next day, so that's why there was a lot of WCW guys. And also Dan the Beast 7 was backstage as well, reportedly. I don't know if he was trying to get a job or just hanging out, I guess. He would have been NWA champion at the time. Do you remember just any of these guys hanging about?
I do not. But obviously, him being NWA champion and hell, Extreme Championship Wrestling came to be. I can't believe that unless there was something going on there that we didn't know about, and Paulie and Dennis Carluzza were still talking. Yeah, I don't know, because that was the whole thing. Shane throwing the belt down and picking it up, throwing the NWA belt down and picking up the ECW one, and essentially putting the NWA in a spiral. I mean, it wasn't what it was anyway at that point, but that was almost like killing the company type of promo. And that was aired all the time, you know? So Dennis, who was trying to do stuff with the NWA, and it was mostly, I worked for Dennis on indies like, you know, after, in between ECW and WWF. And he drew really good houses, but the NWA was never what it was after Shane did the belt throw.
The dark matches are Louis Piccoli pinning Balls Mahoney and JT Smith and Chris Chetti defeating Little Guido and Tommy Rich. Now we get to the opening of the show itself, and Joey Styles welcomes the pay-per-view audience.
Audio issues right off the bat that they
Terrible.
fixed. I give them credit. They fixed it by the time Joel got into the ring.
Yep, they absolutely did. One more thing. Paul Heyman had to fight to keep his own director and cameraman to stay, you know, using the show. The pay-per-view company, I believe, wanted to use their own people. Joey Styles got to remain on commentary solo. Did you prefer Joey on his own, or did you prefer him with a co-commentator with Taz or maybe Cyrus or somebody else?
Well, in the ECW presentation, Joey all the way. One-man commentary team, and you asked the question, is Joey the greatest commentator to ever do it, in my opinion? For a solo commentator, which I've never seen done really, yes, without a doubt. He's one of the rare cases where you really have to be. Taz was one thing, because him and Taz have known each other forever. So when they did that in WWE, it was really good. The ECW, for, you know, WWE version of ECW, it was really good. But Joey has enough personality to be the Jim Ross, the straight commentator, and then give his snarky thing. He had the right balance of everything, that he would commentate right down the middle, call it, but then he would make clueless putts. There'd be certain guys that would get under his skin, and the fan would come out of him. It was the right mixture. You either have it or you don't. It's not taught. Joey's a self-taught commentator in that way. And I do believe JR is the best commentator. Well, I take that back. Okay, we can do a list of the best commentators, but I would put Vince McMahon as number one because it was his company. Of course, he could promote it. JR number two, no matter who the color commentator is, but him and Lawler, obviously. And dare I say it, Joey Styles. That's your Mount Rushmore. Number four, Jesse. So that would be the four people on the Mount Rushmore.
He was color. If we're doing...
Yeah, but Jesse's still one of the best commentators. But Jesse would also, in a lot of ways, I know you have a lot of heat for the 3-count thing. I just feel like Jesse stood out. He's a commentator that got called back 40 years later to do Saturday Night's Main Event. Also, when he went to do Predator, I think Vince fired him, right?
Yeah.
But then they had Saturday Night's Main Event, and Dick Ebersol and NBC wanted Jesse Ventura to commentate, and they hired him back.
Well, the thing is that Predator was a massive success, so they couldn't not have Jesse back after that either.
Well, you didn't know that when the movie was being made, though. Just like Rocky III. How Hogan, if that was a flop, Hogan may never have been Hulk Hogan. But I put Jesse in there as, if you're just talking about straight up commentators, you cannot leave Jesse Ventura off of that. So Vince, Jim Ross, Joey Styles, Jesse Ventura.
Maybe I'm in the minority. I like Joey with a co-commentator. And do you know, I mentioned, Taz in WWE, he also did some commentary with Joey in ECW, I think when his neck was broken. Cyrus later on. He did
the on cameras in the studio in Ron and Charlie's house. Yeah, with the banner. With the ironing board right off camera.
See, that's actually going to be a Secrets of ECW that we're going to do. Future episode, Take a drink. Shane Douglas, I thought, was a really good co-commentator with Joey. He didn't do it very often, but I thought Shane was really underrated as a commentator. And I think the most recent commentary he did was for Ricky Steamboat's comeback match at like 69 or something, like a year or two ago. And,
oh, wow.
Yeah, I thought it was such a shame because Shane's
the
really
one
good.
In North Carolina, right? The one in North Carolina, he came back?
Yeah, was it FTR he was wrestling? I can't remember Ricky's.
Jay Lethal was in the ring with him. I remember he arm dragged Jay Lethal. So I might have been a 6-man. But he might have been teaming with FTR against Jay and some other people. I'm not sure. Now, I still stand. I mean, you and I can agree to disagree. Yeah. I just felt like that made ECW stand out even more with one guy on commentary. It just, and nobody tripped over anybody. Nobody had an agenda. You need to have that chemistry. Joey could play the parts of both very, very well.
What else did Joey bring to ECW apart from the commentary? I mean, I know, and you know for a fact, because you were there, you were Lloyd Van Buren, you were taking phone calls in Todd Gordon's, pawn shop and stuff like that. But did Joey have any other duties beyond being commentary? Because didn't he work for like one of the Aptomags at one point, and then that's how he got into ECW?
I'm not sure. I know that Joey has a sales background, so I have no doubt that Joey had some input into the business of ECW. I'm not sure. I'd have to ask him. But he also had an outside job, so I don't think he could contribute much more. And of course, he would do, the things right by the ironing board with the backdrop. He would drive to the house to do on cameras, probably ADR. In post show, he would probably have to correct some live stuff or whatever. But we didn't do a whole lot of ADR with that. The ADR was actually him on camera and then commentating with that. So what you saw live in the ring with the promos, there was no WWE, like infamously when Legion of Doom, something happened with a finish, they had to come to the back and then come back and hit the finish again like 2 more times. We didn't have that in ECW. The fans would destroy us if we had to, come back and do it all over again. They wouldn't like that.
You call me drinking a water, by the way.
Future episode.
Joey Styles' appearance in ECW always seemed very, very incongruous. He always wore a suit. He wore the glasses. He was, I wouldn't say mousy, but he seemed rather demure and not the kind of person who sort of fit the image of ECW. Yet he was such a great personality for the show, that no one's... I'm trying to think of, like, someone to compare him to, but he seemed to stick out like a sore thumb, but it worked.
Well, it's contrast. It's the Island of Misfit Toys, and he's a misfit within the Island of Misfit Toys. Did you know this? Not a secret to ECW, sorry, but it's Eastern Championship Wrestling. Joey's first try at commentary was being a heel color commentator.
Really?
Yes. And he had somebody named Six Pack with him. It was nice. And he was a heel, and you could tell he was trying to channel Jesse Ventura. But I think Paul saw other stuff. And this is when Eddie Gilbert was booking Eastern Championship Wrestling, I believe. Paulie was there, but he was a heel color commentator in the early days of Eastern Championship Wrestling.
What's Joey doing now? Is he like working for a medical company or something?
I believe so. I haven't talked to him in many months. I think he might have changed his number. I text him once in a while, but he'll text me eventually and we'll catch up. But I think it was, medical. He's great at sales. I mean, he used to work for, I believe, Fox Corp as well. That's where he was working, I believe, during ECW. He was working for one of the news media outlets as a salesperson.
Why does he want nothing to do with wrestling now?
Because he's smart. He's a good man. He doesn't have CTE or anything. I couldn't tell you. Well, it comes to a point, too, if I wasn't doing this with you, I don't even know if I'd even do the thing with Russo. I mean, if I wasn't doing both of those things, you wouldn't know what I was up to. You'd be asking questions. I'd be doing something completely outside of wrestling.
The last, I didn't write this down, so forgive me if I mess this up. I think the last time he was doing any commentary, I'm going to get to his WWE run briefly as well, but the last time he was doing commentary, it was for like an independent wrestling thing, and he made a joke about Donald Trump. This is during his first campaign, and he said, grabbing, the Donald Trump thing, grabbing women by the... that kind of thing. And anyway, Joey made a crack about that. He never said the word, and then he said, speaking about that word, I never said... here's my co-host or whatever it is I'm throwing to the next person. And apparently there was such a massive backlash that the company apologized and da-da-da-da-da. And ultimately it was a fairly innocuous joke. And it was like, Joey comes from ECW where that wouldn't have even registered. And then in 2015 or 2016 or whatever it was, everyone got all up in their feels about a joke that wasn't particularly, offensive or anything like
I
that.
don't-
And then
I
that was
remember-
then he
I
was
can't-
done.
I can't remember the company, but I remember that happening. My God, we're talking about almost 10 years ago. So, but that would have, then he should have got canceled for everything he said in the ECW, because he would say all that stuff.
Yeah. Chikara. Was it Chikara? Yeah, so after his release from WWE, Styles went on record as saying he wanted to be the voice of the indies. It was Evolve he was doing, and then Gabe Sapolsky, ironically, of all people, Gabe Sapolsky, because he was with ECW. He was Paul Heyman's understudy, I guess, at one point.
Yeah.
Gabe Sapolsky immediately apologized for the comment before announcing that Evolve had terminated Styles, and then Beyond Wrestling and Chikara also announced severing ties with Styles. And after that, no wonder he didn't want anything to do with wrestling, because what happened to people?
Well, it's also, what is he needed for? He's got a family, he's got a job, he's got a life outside of wrestling. Like I said, he's one of the smartest guys I've ever met. So he did his thing. If it served him to do it, I'm sure working for Chikara, Evolve, and all the other ones was just a fun little side thing to make a little extra money on the weekends. He didn't need that trouble.
So he was on screen for WWE as a commentator for a year or two. He did some ECW stuff, and then he was replaced by Mike Adamle. I mean, it's almost sad in a sense now we know with Mike Adamle. I mean, he's dealing with terrible CTE issues, so no wonder he couldn't remember anybody's name. But
I was going to say too that, I did some commentary for the 100th episode with Mike, and I think Taz was there too. And it's one of those things that to this day I've been trying. It's funny you mentioned his name. I haven't lately, but last year and a year before, I tried to reach out and find a contact for Mike to personally, even though I wasn't the worst one of all, and I was just in fun, would say my name to him, whatever. But he would make fun of little things I would do. It was harmless. But after that news came out, dude, I'm close to tears right now because I felt so terrible, even joking about it, if he was struggling with it. And this is an example, a prime example for people in and out of the wrestling business. You don't know what somebody's going through. You do not know what somebody's going through. And please, I mean, and it's a world, and you don't have to walk on eggshells all the time, but sometimes you got to just kind of read the room or read the person, and even just asking if they're okay or whatever, what's going on, how are you? You never know. So to this day, I really would love to reach out to him and personally apologize, even if it was just one innocuous comment or whatever in my mind, because you don't know, you don't know how that would have hit him. Maybe 50 people were ribbing him or saying stuff, or Vince was making fun of him, or Vince was dogging him that day and he was just worn down. And here comes Stevie Richards, just as a friendly little jab to his friend Mike Adamle, and that made him go back to the room and be like, what? Why did Stevie say that? You know what I mean? Put it over the top. So if you see this, Mike, I would love to talk to you, and I would love to personally, for everybody in the locker room, apologize for anything that might have been insensitive during literally the battle of your life. I'm sorry.
I believe that Mike, I mean, he wasn't very good on camera. I mean, he looked the part, obviously, but, he never got the names right. He always struggled with remembering. How much of that was due to, his playing career in the NFL, I guess? And was he American Gladiators?
But he was an excellent sports broadcaster in Chicago, too. There was no way to know that he was going to fail that way. I watched some of the, because when they did the story, and I'm sorry to interrupt, when they did the story about him, and I always try to see if there's updates on him, I watched some of the stuff on YouTube of him talking sports on the local Chicago news networks. He was great. He was awesome. You know what I mean? I mean, he's a football player, so obviously it's like me going to do a football broadcast. I'm not going to remember the names. So I don't know. I wish we gave him a little more grace at the time than we did.
Yeah, that being said, that's what I was going to ask was, I believe people, they can make fun of what happened on screen and everything, but I think everyone said he was a very, very nice person, behind
amazing.
the scenes.
A guy that, believe it or not, because I'm a huge NFL fan, I was getting into being a fan then, but I was following the product and especially Philadelphia Eagles. Fly, Eagles, fly, Super Bowl champions. So, but knowing who Mike Adamle was and still is, because he was still Mike Adamle, I was always scared to go up and ask him about his playing days, about football and what it was like and what he thinks about, because back then they were softening the product as well. What he thought about that. I was just too nervous because I didn't want to come off like a mark. So many opportunities to have this conversations that would be great memories for me, you know, as a fan of things that you don't do. And I wish I could go back and have those conversations. Even guys in the business, asking Vince questions, asking Taker, asking Austin, and, you know, asking people that went to territories I never worked in. Just never had the opportunity because I don't want to seem like a mark.
To get back to Joey Styles, one more thing. Do you think he was happier working with WWE.com or did he want to be on screen?
Happier working WWE.com. Yeah. He was in our BWO network takeover special that we did, the hidden one right up with the Star Wars Christmas special in 78. He enjoyed doing that, but he didn't enjoy like traveling. He didn't enjoy like having to do all the he didn't enjoy being in the grind of that. He loves his family, he loves being at home. He's routine oriented. These are just things I know about him, so yeah, I wouldn't think he would like that.
Yeah, he used to do a couple of... I know he did a few of the early episodes of, I think, Legends of Wrestling, Roundtable. And I think at one point, this is years ago, he did a sort of on-shoot location kind of thing where he went to the jewelers where they made the $1 million belt. And he did some little funny things like in the 2010s, for WWE.com and exclusives like that, I guess, as well. And that same shop still exists. And it's also where they shot the original vignettes with Ted DiBiase, getting his belt. And apparently they really made it for him as well.
Back then, and that's what I was saying with the Vinci stuff earlier in the full episode, that you assume it's either going to be, I'm done before my first match, or they're investing a lot of money. Because even with Ted DiBiase, Vince made him stay in the best hotels, limos, and he always had, a couple thousand in spending cash, always on him for the gimmick. So, I mean, I could have caused heat in the locker room because he was being taken care of. But,
it did.
But yeah.
It did, so I believe, yeah. Oh, yeah,
yeah.
Because he was flying first class everywhere as well, and he had his limo to pick him up, yeah.
Maybe Vince was ribbing him.
That's not... that's well within the realms of possibility, I'd suggest. Well within the realms. Right, we're going to move on to from Joey Styles, and we are going to discuss... Well, Joey's in the middle of the ring and barely legally saying, welcome everybody, the audio issues are already happening, but they get that sorted quite quickly. ECW Tag Team Champions of the Dudley Boys and signed Guy Dudley and Joel Gertner interrupts the belts they are wearing. I completely forgot were the knockoffs of the old WWF Intercontinental titles, but they were like silver with like red lettering or something like that. Now, we can talk about the Dudleys in a second, but for goodness, someone I never got around to interviewing, and I should have interviewed. Give me a story on the quintessential stud muffin, Joel Gertner. I've got a few of his quotes as well, if you're interested to hear them a bit later on.
I can definitely text him and get that interview set up for him.
Oh, I've got his email.
Oh, okay.
I've got his email, and I just never did it. Anyway, I am Joel. I drink vodka. I drink scotch, but your mother drinks from my crotch, Gertner.
There you have it. I mean, you want to talk about taking what Lanny Poffo did and completely perverting it? There you go, right there. Lanny at the time was alive, but he would have been rolling over in his grave. But it's an amazing gimmick that he had. The fur coat, the neck brace with the bow tie over the neck brace. These are the little details, the nuance and the detail of this.
Right. Why the neck brace? Where did that come from?
I believe it was after he took the total elimination.
Oh, was it really?
Legal. Yeah, I think this is where it started. I believe, yeah. He took total elimination after the match when the Eliminators won the titles. Spoiler, sorry, you're, however many decades late. And then Joel got into the ring, and they ended up giving him total elimination. And you know what? This was actually, I don't have any outside stories on Joel except the fact he's right up there. I would say if you were going to say, this is going to be a hot take, I would put Joel as the number 5 with commentators. I'd put him up there as somebody that, because he was a heel commentator on ECW with Joey, but then during Extreme Rising, he was a babyface commentator, he had 2 commentators, because I remember he was the reason, man, when I did my little run, onto the title and everything, Joel and his commentary got me over when they were doing those things, and he was excellent with that. So his commentary, heel or babyface, is awesome. And the fact that they didn't do anything with him in the new ECW is like crazy.
He was at One Night Stand, the first one, and he was in the Raw bit of the balcony, then the SmackDown bit of the balcony, and they kicked him out. I was really excited to see Joel.
I remember that.
And
he was trying to interview them, right?
Yeah, and they just didn't do anything with the dude. And why? Because he was, do you know what? He was a good ring announcer as well, because he was a ring announcer first in his salad days, I'm sorry to say. Then when he put on a bit of weight and then, he didn't have the shirt on, he was wearing the jackets and the cut off, trousers, the suit trousers and everything like that. I really enjoyed Joel. Joel so big it's hard to keep from hurting a Gertner.
He came up with all that. Maybe Paul snuck a few in so he can have, his little rhymes in there. The only story I have is the guy should have been featured more in more companies. He should have been a character. Mm-hmm. It's stupid. And WWE's version of ECW, just having him be the ring announcer and running back that entire thing of him being a babyface ring announcer and turning back into a heel manager. You had years worth of stuff.
Do you know, I've just occurred to me now that, obviously WWF stole quite a bit of ECW stuff. He's the Val Venus character a year prior. Joel harder than the tree that killed Sonny Bono Gertner.
Yeah, well, Russo will say he never stole anything from ECW, but yeah, we're great friends. I love Russo, but we still have this. We're still arguing with the fact, come on, man. How could coincidentally all those things happen after ECW came into existence? Why didn't you do it in 91, 92, 93? Vince could have did it very easily.
Yeah, don't you remember Ultimate Warrior doing the balcony dive in 91?
Yeah, I do. He came out the Natural Born Killers all the time.
That's the one. I remember it well. The bacon in her eggs, the man whom she begs. Joel Mama said knock you out, and I just did Gertner. I've got one more. Joel, the man for the man for whom she begs, and the face between her legs, Gertner. I love Joel. I totally forgot about him as one of the co-commentators with Joey, but I thought they did a good job together as well.
Yeah, everything this guy was given, and you're talking about a guy, I don't know the exact backstory, but he was going to a prominent college, and he pursued his dream to do this. No, but I'm still saying he had a successful career, but he definitely didn't make the money he deserved. He's definitely somebody that, I should keep in touch with him because we were keeping in touch. He used to have a show. He continued the gimmick. It was the 69-minute Eargasm podcast. It was new twist on a podcast, but, it's just awesome that I hope he's doing well. If you don't hear from, that's the thing you're talking about, Joey. We don't hear anything from him. But doesn't mean he's not doing well, not doing exceptionally well. Same thing with Joel, and I hope he is doing well, and I hope he gets an opportunity because he's not aged out of doing things. He can still contribute to the business.
Speaking of promo, this will be for a future episode, but Louis Dangerously had a really interesting career after wrestling as well, but that will be for a future episode, I'm sorry to say. The Dudley Boys. Now, I can't remember if I asked you this beforehand, but Devon Dudley gets on the microphone and he doesn't swear. Now, I suspect this is one of the pay-per-view edicts from DirecTV or whoever else saying, limit the swearing, limit the blood, because they did say limit the blood, because Devon says, thou shalt not mess with the Dudleys that he would say in WWF and WWE. I wanted to ask you, if I haven't asked before, the Dudleys' ability to incite a riot.
Oh, yeah. Is that a rhetorical question?
Yes. Have you been anywhere where a riot nearly kicked off? because of
not when they were in this form. Obviously this is towards the end of my run in ECW, and then came back for one match and then gone. So no, they had an opportunity to really, and I don't think there was a place ever where it was closer to being in a riot than the Elks Lodge in Queens, New York. That's usually the videos you see on YouTube. And then they took it to pay-per-views. Even there was a pay-per-view, I think, in Pittsburgh. They did it all the time. Let's just say that, no matter where it was. But they didn't care if after this one, if it was televised, non-televised, whatever it was. Bubba was saying some stuff, Devon was saying some stuff, and it was usually Bubba was this close to somebody's face, and it was going to go down. You've seen plenty of times where he was right in a dude's face, or somebody was trying to climb over the railing, and Bubba was just doubling and tripling down on it. And dare I say it, I don't know. You have 500 wrestling fans, and Bubba and Devon. I would still put my money on Bubba and Devon. I don't know, because they just it's like that fight at the end of the one with Jet Li where everybody's coming up the thing and he just keeps kicking and fighting them, and he's just not afraid and he's not blowing up. Bubba was a bouncer. I have no doubt Devon was a bouncer back in the day, and those are two tough dudes. Obviously you got to climb through the ropes. There's your most vulnerable point. They're not going to wait. It's not pro wrestling. You're getting the point of the boot right in your mouth. And I have no doubt that they would, maybe by the 400 person in the crowd, they might overtake them, but Bubba and Devon will beat more people up than you realize.
Now then, the match itself is the Dudley Boys versus the Eliminators for the ECW Tag Team Championships, and it's quite an odd match because it's very one-sided. You wouldn't sort of presume it unless you knew the backstory, I guess.
I don't know. I'm not privy to this. I wasn't in any booking meetings. I think this was an excellent first match to open up our first pay-per-view. The first thing the casuals or anybody curious would see. It was a really, really good match. It was a great match as far as a first match on a pay-per-view. So stuff people haven't seen. It definitely featured the Eliminators more, and it was your standard, just the straightest explanation. Occam's razor. We're going to take it home. The baby faces are going over. We have a title change. Oh, and this heel commentator or heel manager, we're going to take him out and launch him into the neck brace bow tie era. So perfect opener. Really, really great opener. And we gave him action. It wasn't too long, and we gave him the babyface over with a title victory. Did they dominate the Dudleys a little bit? Yeah, but it was the time to give the people a babyface win and also showcase what the Eliminators, and you said you really like Perry as a performer, so did I. These are two big jack dudes that could do stuff skinny guys my size couldn't even do. So it was a really way to showcase how ECW stands out.
The reason that the Dudleys would dominate so much was that Bubba Ray Dudley had a broken ankle going into the match. So I don't think there's much they could do.
Wow. He didn't show it. I mean, I'm sure he taped it up and everything, but Bubba was moving. Bubba was still running around. Bubba was bumping. It's adrenaline, too, obviously. They were all probably so excited it didn't matter.
I'm just looking. He took, 5 weeks off, 5.5 weeks off after that match to heal. So that makes sense then. Anything you want to mention about Saturn? Because I'm a big Perry Saturn fan. I always thought that he could do everything Sabu could do. I thought as far as flying, I thought he was a real good all rounder. I know less about John Cronus, of course, but I don't know if there's anything you want to say about the Eliminators or them personally, professionally, anything.
Well, Perry said we disagree on everything in the business, so Perry's going to disagree when I put him over, I guess. No, I think Perry, the thing with Perry is you're right. He can do everything Sabu could do. Sabu had a lot of mystique because he never cut promos. He never talked. That was something right there. But Perry, when he did talk, he was like, this dude been through some stuff. This dude's a tough dude. He had a legitimate background being an Army Ranger, all that stuff. Those are all marketable things. And that's why Perry really did shine a lot in WCW and to a degree WWE. So Perry was a single star. John Kronos was a very big, lovable type guy. You know, when he came out and he was doing all the woo, 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 you know, kind of cuckoo kind of stuff, he was really kind of crazy. But he was also one of the lightest workers you'll ever be in the ring with. So, Perry, do you disagree with any of that?
I don't think so. Did you ever take Total Elimination?
No, I didn't. I never took it. I was in the ring with them in a 6-man when they gave it to Francine, remember?
Oh, yeah. But Francine's such a trooper, though.
6-man tag, it was myself and the Eliminators versus her and the Pitbulls, and they gave her the Total Elimination.
For people who don't know what Total Elimination is, explain it. 'Cause it's if you see
it's
it once, you'll never forget it.
It's 2 leg lariat. It's one load behind your legs and one high like a regular leg lariat. It's like a clothesline. You're clotheslining with the legs. It's the old playground thing, but you're spin kicking. And they would lay sometime. I mean, they both had a martial arts background. So Kronos could legitimately sweep your legs and Perry could legitimately kick you in the face. So you're taking it, whether you want to or not. That's why sometimes it would be, I think one time it was like, hey, don't worry about the bump, brother. And I was like, yeah, you don't have to worry about the bump. But they wouldn't hurt anybody. It's just, it's a momentum-based thing. You know, in Perry, sometimes guys would take bumps, sometimes, but I don't remember Perry like with the spin. And Perry, you can disagree with this if you want. I'm not going to let that go. The spin kick Perry would do, John, you don't see coming. Perry, you can see coming. And I think when they would call it, John's legitimate sweep of the legs, the bump would take care of itself. You know what I mean? You don't want to bump too early on that. You just kind of want to stand there, be stiff, and they hit you with it and you bump.
I thought it was the other way around. I thought Perry did the sweep, the leg sweep. Am I going
You might
crazy?
be right. I don't know. I thought...
No, John would do the head and Perry would do the leg sweep.
My guess on that would be then it would be a shoot sweep. But my guess with the upper one would be John is so much he's like got maybe longer legs and he's a little bit thicker. It can knock the guy down a little bit more. I don't know. There were a couple times I thought they reversed it. Honestly, I don't know. They could probably do it both ways.
Yeah, I think so. There is on YouTube, there is a compilation of the Eliminators Total Elimination. So give that a watch because it is one of the best tag team finishes you could ever ask for. And it's something I think people should bring back. Was it AOP you were saying they did some really lame version of it?
With the clothesline. Yeah. Hey, by the way, Perry, and Perry can disagree with this, but I think Perry is one of the most underrated workers ever. And they're one of the most underrated tag teams. Which means Perry will say they were overrated.
We're probably going to end on this match because there's so many different things to talk about with it. Rob Van Dam versus Rob Van Dam versus Lance Storm. I'm sorry, Chris Candido's name here. It was meant to be Chris Candido, but he had to take a 6-week layoff due to a partially torn bicep. And Candido cuts a promo talking up his accomplishments, but also sneaks in a quick sort of line about not being able to say Tammy Sitch's gimmick name, Sonny, because Bruce will get mad. If that wasn't already a hint enough that ECW was working with the WWF, what would it be? Bruce being Bruce Pritchard, of course.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it was a shame. It was a shame Chris couldn't work the pay-per-view. He was a true wrestling fan, and I'm sure he saw an opportunity to get eyes on him to look at a different way, because Rob said it at the end. I'm not skipping ahead, but his promo was like, now that everybody see me here, I'm worth more money somewhere else. And it was an awesome promo. He was trying to find his voice and his character at the end of that, but it was the birth of Rob Van Dam, and it was kind of cool to see.
Talk about the match then, all the way through.
Well, I mean, you talk about it. You have the Dudley's Eliminators. That's presented in a certain way, starts to show off, warms people up. You get good action and everything. And these two are definitely just, as far as workers, as far as knowing what to do, as far as being athletic, the fans are getting more of the same, but something completely different than the first match. A different look at that. And we didn't know what we were going to get after the finish of the match with Rob's promo, so that was a bonus. But yeah, I mean, these guys had great chemistry together. There's one where Lance Storm, my God, he picked Rob up almost like a reverse power slam, and the side of Rob's head hits that chair. Do you remember that? Such a nasty bump. And then I don't know if these two worked when Rob found himself and then Lance found himself with the Impact players. I don't know if that match occurred, but
yeah, they did. 98, 99 they wrestled. Yeah, they've wrestled quite a few times.
Then you were getting a precursor. You were getting kind of them feeling each other out, because I felt like with this match they were kind of feeling each other out, that they didn't work a whole lot together anywhere else. But then you go fast forward to those matches and you see this was the birth not only of Rob Van Dam as we know him today, but also the birth of the chemistry of what these two workers could do, whether with each other or in other matches. Because Lance was also very vanilla. Here, Rob was very, where am I going with this? You know, and maybe when he was cutting that promo, and I don't know if he was supposed to cut the promo, by the way. That's urban legend. Did Rob grab them? Because that thing, well, we're jumping around, but it's all kind of encapsulated with the match was the match, and you could see what both could offer. And you also see how they could work together, but it wasn't quite, you needed a storyline, you needed more chemistry. But that whole thing with Lance going to shake Rob's hand and Rob not shaking the hand and Lance's confused reaction and the promo, it all felt real. That it wasn't like booked that way. Did you feel that way?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, why don't we stick with Rob now? Because we're going to come back to Lance Storm. We're going to go to the chair shot at the end of it, everything. But there's a big backstory with this match that Rob wasn't even booked on the show. That's true. Rob was butthurt over it, and rightly so, I think, as well. Because, I mean, who else better to showcase what ECW is all about, I'm sure Rob would say, than the whole effing show. But then neither was Tommy Dreamer booked on the show, which is kind of weird. There are a couple of people that seem to be missing from the show, but Rob sort of sneaks in, I guess, at the last second. There's a few questions here, but when did, as far as you could tell, Rob start getting unhappy with his position in ECW and started considering leaving?
Well, I would say that promo. Like I said, if there was any kind of discussion that day, say backstage, like I said, I had blinders on. I was just concerned with trying to do the best that I could do. For all I know, Rob could have been 10 feet away, like pointing the finger in Paulie's face and saying, if you don't book me on this show tonight, I'm gone. Or maybe Paul saw his displeasure and put him on the show. And maybe Paul deep down saw all that in Rob and saw the intensity and saw Rob a little bit of like, could be considered arrogance, confidence, whatever you want to call it. And he said, I can use that. And told Rob, but didn't tell anybody else, cut this promo afterwards. That to me seems very feasible. But I didn't witness, like Rob's not the type to go around to every talent and go, can you believe this BS? Okay, there's guys out there that'll go to everybody to try to plead their case, to do whatever, when in essence, nobody cares about anybody but themselves in the wrestling locker. But I believe Paulie told him, between me and you, do this. Just even if Lance wants to shake your hand or whatever, be a prick, be an ass, be cocky, and cut a promo about how you weren't, but make the most out of it. Paulie was the best at that. Take his personal feelings out of it, at least temporarily, and let's make some money with this. And look, if that didn't happen, would we have Rob Van Dam as we know Rob Van Dam today? Maybe not. Everybody's got their id. Everybody's got their motivation for their character. That moment there was Rob's motivation to become the whole effing show.
Do you remember, because I know you were with ECW for was it a month or two afterwards? I can't remember when you had the neck injury. Was it April or May?
Well, I had the neck injury. The guardrail was May May 10th or May 17th, 97. And then I showed up in WCW July 7th, 1997.
Well, so you were there for a couple of months afterwards. Was there any, I know you were focused obviously on your own stuff, but were there any chatter in the locker room in the weeks after this that, man, Rob's really going, Rob's really upset? And then he would actually appear on WWF programming managed by Jerry Lawler, of all people, I guess. I mean, that plays onto the Manhattan Center Raw from a future episode from February. But was it like a big deal that Rob was actually leaving, or at least people thought he was leaving?
I think by that point, we all had suspicions that Vince was subsidizing ECW. We all had these, there was just too many coincidences of, you know, like you say, Bruce's name, doing this, things happening. I think, now if you want to say something that was really like somebody had left to do something else and got so much heat in the early days, Sabu, this leads up to Sabu and Taz, and we can cover it in part 2. Sabu had taken the Japanese booking, remember?
Oh, yeah.
But then but then he was persona non grata, and Paul buried him and did all that stuff, and then you didn't see Sabu again. You saw Rob again after that on ECW. He wasn't gone. If you really wanted to play it up, Rob wouldn't be on TV or on any shows for like 2 months, right? But then what happens? You lose one of your biggest draws and people won't come see him, so you're trapped.
What do you think of him actually appearing on WWF TV? Because obviously at that point you've got your suspicions that there's a working relationship there. But, I mean, as it relates to you, were you thinking, man, you know, because you were one of the hottest characters on ECW TV at that point, were you thinking this could be my ticket to the WWF? Now, Rob's going over there and working both companies. What about you?
I was already talking to Bruce and Bischoff.
At the same time?
No, Raven was talking to Bischoff and Raven was talking to me. I had a meeting with Bruce where I went up there, believe it or not, I went up to Stanford to have a meeting with Bruce and with Vince. And it was kind of funny that it was just weird because Paul called me and said the meeting was canceled. But the meeting wasn't canceled. I was staying at Rich Baker's house, who was in event booking and everything. I don't know the exact date of that, but I do believe it was right. Dude, everybody that looked at it at that point knew that something was going on between WWE or WWF and ECW. And at the same time, everybody after that pay-per-view was also looking to see where they can get better paydays because we were getting paid nothing. And this is right in the middle of the blank contract. So, of course, I wasn't one of those people going to Rob like, brother, what are you doing? We're a team, blah, blah, blah. I was like, he might have been handed a blank contract too, for all we know.
Right, so I'm just looking at his match listings. He would appear with ECW through May, and then he would take a tour with All Japan. And sorry, he would appear on WWF television on the 12th of May, wrestling Jeff Hardy, who was, you know, still in a jobber at that point. And then he would do an All Japan tour, appear with the WWF a couple more times, then back to ECW, then back to WWF, then back to ECW. I think he would wrestle.
So he was gone a little bit after that Monday night. I see it all runs together.
Yeah. No, he was still on ECW TV for another month after the barely legal.
So all the taped stuff was still running as he was doing all this other stuff.
He was doing house shows.
Okay, so, and he was busy.
Yeah. Oh, he was staying very busy, let me tell you. We're going to stick on Rob for a second more. I think that was a really good promo. And I think when people think of a good promo, I'm sure they think of someone like, I mean, let's just use the archetypal example of The Rock or a Hulk Hogan. Let me tell you, brother, you know, something that, you know, they get the catchphrases and stuff like that. But then to bring up Dutch once again, he doesn't get his due as a great interview because he didn't have the catchphrases, but he would talk to you like a person and he would get his point across. And to tie this in, Rob grabs the mic, he makes his point very succinctly, but he's got a good voice, he projects well, his voice is absolutely completely different to, you know, then as what it is now, but I know you know the same feeling after the surgeries with your throat as well. But I think Rob's maybe, the point I'm trying to get at, an underrated interview, at least in ECW. He wasn't really allowed to do too much in WWE. Well,
I think that interview, see, when you first look at that interview in a vacuum, you say that was a hell of a promo. But when you see what Rob could do in future weeks, months, years, decades after that, it's subpar for what Rob can do. But he didn't find his voice. That was the dude. When I was watching it, I was reacting on just when he did this. It was like, does he even know what he has with just doing this one thing here? Just does he know what he has? That somebody pointed out that he discovered. It was the birth of so many things having to do with the Rob Van Dam character that when you look back on it, you're like, yeah, that was from the heart. He was speaking, but it wasn't like top-notch Rob Van Dam promos, but you had to work at that. I'm not putting the promo. I'm just saying in the vacuum, you're like, wow, that's like a pipe bomb. That's like a pipe bomb type promo. Like he's burying the company. He's saying he's leaving. He's worth more money somewhere else. It's like, what is going on here? Usually everybody's happy to be here. That's a pipe bomb promo before Punk even did it. But when you put it in the body of work, that really good promo it pales in comparison to the real Rob Van Dam promos. I'm telling you, dude, I got to say it once again. When he did this, I just kept saying it out loud. I said, dude, does he even realize what he just did, what he has? And the half a smirk when he did. It just, that's what makes wrestling awesome, that you can find something so small that can become you months down the line. It's cool stuff.
So going from Rob Van Dam, we're going to go to Lance Storm. Did you ever work Lance one-on-one?
Only in WWE. This time I know for sure.
Very good. Talk about Lance. See, right, okay. So when Stevie said to me, we should do, this show together, and I said, yeah, and we were sort of trying to think like what it would be like. And I said, as far as like wrestling podcasters go, I compared you most to Lance Storm as someone who can, more than basically anyone else, can really just get into the minutiae of the psychology of wrestling and analyze it and come away with a conclusion or how you would improve it, that kind of thing. Was he always that analytical and that sort of, almost obsessed, I guess, with the psychology of wrestling at that point?
I really don't know. I didn't know that Lance Storm until WWE, which means he knew even more then. And I think this might have been the first time Lance was on ECW in any form or fashion, right?
I don't think so. No, he was feuding with Chris Candido at that point.
Oh, okay. I'm telling you, dude, it wasn't, we didn't have cliques in ECW, but people did hang around who they hung around, and you had Taz and Perry, and then you had, I just kind of sat wherever I sat. Then you had other people that were kind of friends and hung out and roomed together or traveled together. I never really crossed paths with Lance, unless to say hello and goodbye in ECW. I got to know him much, much more in WWE, but never more outside of just wrestling. Now, obviously, you talk a match over with the guy, you're like, he knows exactly what he's doing and he knows what we could do. And we had excellent chemistry calling matches. You would think two people that are so OCD about everything, we were only OCD about what can I do for you? What can I get over? How can I bump here? Hey, I got a cool way I can take the leg lariat. How can we get into the single leg crab? Or he would say, hey, maybe you can get this heat spot on me, put this move on me, hit me with the Stevie kick here. These are the things we talked about. So that's, but definitely one of them. I mean, WCW, for all intents and purposes, this will be the one time that WCW booked the talent better than WWE. Mm-hmm. They booked Lance extremely well.
That was Russo, I believe, or at least partially Russo, because he came straight. I love Lance. He was one of the few bright spots in that festering turd of a company in 2000. It was just, I watched that every week because at one point I couldn't get WWF TV because it was on Sky Sports. It was expensive. But WCW TV was on basic cable, and they had the worldwide compilation. It was 6 weeks behind that we got it on Channel 5, which was terrestrial, available to all. And Lance Storm was one of the absolute few bright spots on the 2000 shows. He did a great job. And everyone associates Lance with being a belt collector. As far as, on screen, he did the belt collector gimmick. He only had like 3 belts for like a week. But that's how powerful that image was. And I think, was it like Russo or someone had a bet? And he thought he couldn't get Lance over, and then he basically put every single belt on him, and lo and behold, he was really, really popular. He was one of the best characters.
That's one way to do it. Hey, I'm not over either, Russo. Put all the belts on me.
But no, I thought Lance Storm was great in WCW. He was never better. That was the best he ever was, I think. What do you think about that as far as comparing him with the Impact players, for example?
Well, I mean, he got a chance to stand out on his own. The Impact players were a great tag team, but Lance didn't really cut promos. It was more PJ doing stuff or Jason, or they did their little shtick of what they did. In WCW, got a chance to cut a promo. And why WWE, when they started him off strong, because he came in, he was one of the first people to interfere with the invasion and do the drop kick off the top rope, right? Or the clothesline.
Yeah, he's one of the run-ins. He was the first one.
First one.
Was he the first person to ever do it?
I think Lance was the very first one, and they ran out through the crowd, and he put his arms up in the air. I remember that. Why they couldn't do a translation of the Lance Storm character from WCW and WWE, you know, they give him all the credit in the world now, but WWE was man, they were so guilty of ruining any talent that came in. Monty Brown, like that's when AJ came over, like they're going to bury this guy because they buried Monty Brown as Marcus Corvan.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't get Lance Storm right. They didn't get anybody in WCW right. That was why I guess Sting especially was just like, besides the thing with Rock and Booker T, who are you? You know, basically all the top guys were like, I'm just sitting back and getting paid.
Hey, well, at least with Sting, he eventually went over there and lost to Triple H. Because don't get me started on that.
It was close though.
Yeah.
He gave him the rub. Kid.
The thing is with Lance Storm is, like, 1 week he had a massive cock for some reason, and then the next week Steve Austin was coming out calling him boring and falling asleep during his matches. It's like they constantly went through, how can we screw this dude over this week? And I'm like, yeah, he's boring, but he's meant to be boring. He's a technical wrestler whose character is he's boring, and he goes out and says, if I can be serious for a minute. And it was great. And then how WWE couldn't translate that. They didn't have to do anything. Just do the exact same thing over there. It would have been great. He could have been. I'm not saying he would have been Bret Hart. Like WWF has no history of pushing Canadian stars, for goodness sake. I'm not saying he would have been Bret Hart level, but he could have been.
Or Samoans.
He could have been Benoit level. Lance Storm there. He had all the tools and didn't have all the major issues of Benoit. So there you go.
Can I give you another hot take? I would double down on the Bret Hart thing. You know why?
Okay.
Because people can consider Bret Hart to be boring. And look at how the machine got behind him. I didn't make the point during the released wrestlers, but this is an example. He could have been Bret Hart. Of course he could have been Bret Hart. Bret Hart could have been Lance Storm too, and came out and did the Cabbage Patch. Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
That's when he had his last match in WWE against me on Heat. They had him coming out doing the Cabbage Patch, then dance. What if Bret Hart was doing the Cabbage Patch or this or that? It would hurt his legacy. So what I'm saying is, and I didn't say it before, I wish we got it in earlier, those released wrestlers from WWE and AEW, solely the blame is placed on creative. You can get anybody over just as much with Lance Storm. You can take anybody that's over and bury them. You can take anybody that's buried and make them over. If the machine gets behind you in the right way and you can carry that ball, you'll be over. That's it. So the people that got released that we talked about earlier in the episode, creative has nothing for you, so we're going to fire the wrestler. But you fire the writer. That's like me saying I can't take bumps anymore at 53 and Ed Koskey gets fired because he's writing. Sounds stupid, right? Mm-hmm. So if creative has nothing for you, or if creative is writing dog crap for Lance Storm, why do you blame Lance Storm? And why do you put up with that? That's my point with that.
Just one last thing on Lance. We'll get to the finish of the match in a second. But just from a technical in-ring aspect, if you had to give a rank, 0 to 10, I'm sure it'd be relatively high. But how good was he in the ring, Lance?
Oh, a 10. 10 out of 10. Everybody, this is why I can give a lot of tens. You know why? Because Lance understood his character, understood his moves, knew what he could do effectively and safely. And dare I say it, Rob, while some of the stuff can be a little rough, when Rob understood that, Rob's a 10 too. There's lots of guys, if you understand your character and understand how to do a match, and also you can work anybody. Lance Storm can work anybody. And that's a comparison, like people have compared Lance to me as saying Lance could have a great match with anybody. I agree with it.
That could be your death knell, though, can't it? If you can have a great match with anybody.
It was our death knell, both of us. Because if you have a great match with anybody, we don't need to push you. We don't need to do anything with you. We can spend all our resources on that guy. You know, that's the kind of thing. I was going to say this too. Dude, I completely forgot.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. But the Lance thing is that he can have a great match with anybody. He can cut a promo that can be great if you give him the right verbiage and you let him go within the guardrails of his character. A lot of guys are 10s and girls if they understand what they can and, more importantly, what they cannot and should not do.
We're going to end on the match itself because we were going to do what went wrong, but it's not really like you can analyze. I mean, there's nothing to analyze here. They're just two of the worst chair shots ever. Is Lance Storm, and I believe he wasn't doing that as part of his character. He's just never thrown a chair before this time. So he does these like sort of love taps with the steel chair, and Rob Van Dam's had two of them, and he even stomps his foot when he does it. Even do like that as well. And I mean, what are you going to say? Hit him harder? Because then if you hit him harder in the head unprotected, it's going to be even worse.
Well, we talked about it before the show off air, so we have the pre-show up on Patreon.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I stole your points as well when I said that.
No, my point is, as a worker, don't hit me hard. You know, and I know Rob probably was like, I could have took it or whatever. But at the same time, that's the one thing that Lance, maybe it was part of the match where Rob had said, grab a chair, hit me with the chair. And Lance just did it. Instead of, no, I don't do that well. Let's go in this. I'll tell you what, he made up for it with that reverse power slam because Rob's head got jacked. And that was before the chair shots, right?
Yeah.
That was during the match.
Yeah.
So it's a weak chair shot. I wish now at 53 years old and seeing some of the problems that other people have in the business that have been in it a while, I wish there were more chair shots like that. And then the elimination of some of it. You know, you could say, well, you wrestled in ECW, you did them, you took them. I'm sure as hell took way more than I gave. They were kind of unnecessary, but ECW in a way too needed to go way past the line and then pulled back rather than us trying to motivate people to work harder. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I'm diverting away because, like you said, I have nothing to say about the chair shot because Lance was being a professional wrestler trying to protect a fellow professional wrestler. And that just sums it up.
On that basis, we're going to shut down this show for the week. Don't be worried. We're going to be back next week. That was
my paranoia in our production meetings during the week. Is it over? Is it over? Oh, my God. Oh, God. I got to go to Walmart and get a job.
Oh, for God's sake, I was going to say, I can give this up. It's great. Anyway, that's it until this show is out every single Friday, for goodness sake. I think usually about Eastern time, 2 p.m. We're available also audio version on all podcast platforms. If I know it's more of a visual show, I say this every week now, but we've got the audio version as well. Should you require that for whatever reason. But until then, we'll see you again next Friday. Over to you, Stevie, to take us out.
Yeah, if you don't want to see the South Philly Italian talking with his hands, we have an audio version available where you don't have to see the focus pulling from my talking with my hands. Thank you very much, my dad, Ralph Manna. He didn't have a gray hair into his 70s when he passed away. Fun fact. My father.
Oh, right, yeah. I was trying to think.
I said Ralph Manna. You're like, who's that? Well, now my dad gets a shout out. Hopefully he gets I put my dad over with that. So, I'd like to put everybody over on patreon.com/Stevie Richards, the supporters, everybody who supports the content. The interaction in that community, James, is awesome as well. We have watch-alongs, premium content, behind-the-scenes videos, show notes, and also pre- and post-show up there. Much more stuff to come. Patreon.com/Stevie Richards. Check out our thank you brother tier or our producer tier. And that's about it. Once again, James has 2 books, one on Owen Hart, one on The Rock. The James Romero YouTube channel, where somehow he gets even more heat than I do with this show. And I read the comments, sorry.
Oh, I
and
don't.
also,
You must be joking.
I don't read them here. I read them on yours. Stevie Richards Fitness, check that out. You can always reach out, comment, and that's all I got for them. So, patreon.com first. Oh my God.
I'm not
fully
editing this
accent.
out. You've got to keep on going.
I'm going to keep on going. My wife just waved at me. She said I can do it. You can do it.
Aha. You've only done
Patreon.
one.
Ha ha. Ha ha. Ha ha. I'm making up for it now. Thank you guys so much for watching episode 33 of the Stevie Richards Show. See you next week, episode 34.